Good evening, everyone. I want to thank you all for joining us this evening. Before we get started, I'm going to ask that everyone please stand for the pledge, and Councilman Dale will lead us in prayer. Councilman Dale has the floor at this time.
Good evening, everyone. As you know, I'm Tim Dale, the Mayor Pro Tem of the City of Mount Pleasant. I've got a quick statement I'd like to make prior to our meeting. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for being here this evening. We appreciate everyone's thoughts in this project, and we do ask that everyone be respectful and considerate of each other tonight, of each other's opinions. I would also like to thank the staff for all the extra efforts that they put forward the last few days, trying to help make this to accommodate the people that we have tonight with the additional chairs. You noticed out back, the ones that are out back, that we have cameras up, and coming in the next few weeks, we will have a big video screen back there also, where people in the rear can watch at that time. But it just wasn't feasible to get done in this matter of time. But I do appreciate everyone's consideration on this. Also, we do have people that's watching online tonight, that do make comments. And Madam Secretary, at this time, I'd like to be put on the record to say that I'd like for you to be abreast, make us abreast of any of the comments that are being made or seem pertinent to you, if there are any tonight, because we do want to include those people in the comment session tonight also, okay? So that, again, thank each and every one of you for being here this evening.
All right, thank you, Councilman Dale. At this time, we'll go ahead and get started. Our first item on the agenda will be to consider approval of the minutes of February 20th, 2024 regular session. Council, if we have had a chance to look over the minutes, the floor will be open for a motion.
After reviewing the presented minutes, I'm going to make a motion that we approve the February 20th, 2024 regular session meeting that's been presented.
I'll second that.
We have a motion made by Councilman Dale, second by Councilman Chappelle. Madam Secretary, record a vote, please.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Vote is unanimous. We'll go ahead and close that item on the agenda. At this time, please, if you have cell phones, please get them turned down. So we want to be respectful of everyone here. We're going to go ahead and move on to item 2. Item 2 is our public comments. The City Council welcomes citizens' participation and comments at all council meetings. Citizens' comments are limited to 2 minutes out of respect for everyone's time. The council is not permitted to respond to your comments. The Texas Open Meetings Act requires that topics of discussion, deliberation be posted on an agenda not less than 72 hours in advance of the council meeting. If your comments relate to a topic that is on the agenda, the council will discuss the topic on the agenda at the time that the topic is discussed and deliberated. Okay, with that being said, at my discretion, I'm gonna go ahead and allow 3 minutes tonight. There'll be no transfer of time. And please, we have a large group, so we wanna not have any outbursts or loud cheering. We wanna be able for the public to hear everything. At this time, I welcome anyone that would wanna address the council. Please state your name and address.
Should know that. My name is Debbie Corbell. I live in the city of Mount Pleasant. In my continuing effort to look at how our tax dollars are spent, I find the following. The Director of Human Resources was hired on July the 5th, 2022. In the letter of acceptance, it states that the position will pay $95,000, but after 6 months, a possible increase to $100,000. The letter mentions the normal benefit package, but has no reference to car allowances or other financial benefits. Yet after only 26 days, on August the 1st, 2022, an allowance package for $600 a month, $7,200 a year for a car allowance and speaking Spanish were given. Why are we providing car allowances for staff when there are leased vehicles at City Hall that are already being paid for with tax dollars? Why are we giving this stipend at all? Where is this car being driven to, and why are we providing such services? $600 a month in addition, $95,000. But then on September the 7th of 2022, about 9 weeks from the hire date, that position was given another $5,000 raise. 9 weeks into it. Not the 6 months on the original letter of acceptance, not in line with the hiring agreement. And then, less than a month later, on October the 1st, 2022, barely 3 months from the hire date, that position gets another $6,000 added to the salary. So we're at $106,000 plus $7,200 a year. 3 months later, on January 26, 23, that position received another $4,000 raise, now up to $110,000. On October the 1st, another $5,000 raise to $115,000. All of those raises in barely a year. On April the 3rd, the Director of Finance position was hired at a salary of $120,000. The letter of acceptance shows benefit package of normal benefits, insurance, etc. But on April the 6th, 3 days later, I have a memo from the Director of Finance that is entitled Car Fringe Benefits regarding mileage up to 176 miles a day for 7-day pay periods. That appears to be in connection with a car that had been leased, which the initial charge was $1,267.97. Monthly charge for the lease is $636.
That's it. No. No, we can't transfer time, but he can speak though. Yes, ma'am. With the multitude of people that we have, Ms. Debbie, is the reason we limited it this week, because we're gonna have a lot of people speaking. So. Thank you.
Well, I will tell you this. This follows on to hotel charges, car allowances, and we're paying for a hotel expenses for this person while you're paying them that salary.
Okay, thank you again, Ms. Debbie. We have anyone else at this time?
Mayor, I'd like to remind everybody that a very good friend of mine and somebody that's been a staple in this community for a very long time, his wife has passed away. I'd ask everybody to have Ed Flory and his family in your prayers. I believe the visitation is tomorrow night and the funeral's Thursday. So if everybody could just keep the Flory family in your prayers, I'd appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Councilman Haddon. Okay, do we have anyone at this time that would like to come up? You'll have to hold that button down the entirety.
Ladies and gentlemen, hello. My name is Tracy Kello, and I'm the wife of the late Jerry Kello and a member of the community who deeply cares about its welfare. I'm here to address a matter of critical importance: the potential establishment of Christus Hospital in Mount Pleasant. I'm baffled by the notion that anyone could oppose this development agreement, which would bring enhanced healthcare services to this community. Allow me to share a personal story that underscores the urgency of this matter. My husband's life hung in the balance as he lay in a field, his body broken, waiting agonizingly for over an hour and a half for the emergency life flight to arrive. The lack of adequate healthcare facilities in our area undoubtedly contributed to this dire situation. Had there been a Christus Hospital here, perhaps he would still be with us today. It has come to my attention that if this city council fails to approve the development agreement, Christus might forego the opportunity to build here. This development agreement, mind you, has already received the green light from the city's legal counsel, financial advisors, and its own economic development corporation. By rejecting it, this council would be acting against sound legal advice, financial expertise, and the advice of its very own economic development corporation. I implore each member of this council to consider the consequences of their decision. Are you prepared to face another grieving family and explain that their loss was due to a vote against bringing better health care to Mount Pleasant? How many more have to die that might have been saved? The stakes are too high, the need too pressing to allow this opportunity to slip through our fingers. Thank you for your attention, and I urge you to prioritize the well-being of the community and its citizens by supporting the development agreement, which would ensure the establishment of a Christus Hospital here in Mount Pleasant.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, at this time, if we have no other speakers, then we'll go ahead and move on. Would you like to? Come on. Again, this is just public comment. This is not about an agenda item at this time, but you can go ahead and 3 minutes. State your name.
Council members, my name is Zeth Abney. I live at 107 Alexander Road, right here in Mount Pleasant, Texas, and I'm here to voice support for the Anderson Town Crossing Land Development Project. I support it for several reasons. I've taken the time to inform myself as best as possible in regard to the ins and outs of the project as a whole, as well as what's being voted on today in particular. As an individual, the difference between the PID bonds being approved tonight or not boils down to essentially whether or not there will be quality of life improvements for citizens such as myself, such as the marina, the scenic walking trail, and most importantly, as made clear previously, the hospital. On a more fundamental level, I see the ATC project as absolutely essential to the growth of the Mount Pleasant community and the East Texan culture at large. Upon moving to Mount Pleasant, I founded a small marketing agency built on the mission to support small businesses being competitive in a modern economy and legitimize the creative disciplines as career pursuits for the young talent in East Texas. My dream is to see East Texan culture and values flourish and persist long into the future. The Anderson Town Crossing project is the ideal catalyst to realize this vision and ensure the persistence of East Texan culture and values. The people behind this project are good East Texas people who have the skills and intent to ensure that this project benefits the people of Mount Pleasant in particular in a profound way. All changes come with discomfort and uncertainty, but without change there is no progress, and progress is absolutely essential in the modern world that we find ourselves in. I believe in this project, I believe in the people behind it, and I believe there is no better way to enrich the community of Mount Pleasant and cultivate the culture of East Texas.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Have anyone else? I'm getting.
I'm Tony Camp. I'm from Cookville, Texas. I'm 61 years old. I have been afraid of change most of my life. If y'all look right here, I still carry a flip phone. Okay? But change like this is needed. You know that. It's not just for this bunch here. It's for our grandkids. This is on the Anderson Town Crossing. It's needed. And I appreciate y'all feel the same way I do. And I'm just old country boy, that's all I am. But thank you for the time.
Thank you, sir. All righty. We have anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
We have several outside in the foyer that would like to speak, please.
Okay. Sir. Yeah.
Art,
Yeah, you'll have to hold it.
I gotta hold it? Kind of, no. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I will hold it. Just for y'all. Hello to my friends. Good to see y'all. It really is. About a little bit more than a year ago, I stood before you and said, hey, Chick-fil-A really wants to come to Mount Pleasant. Thank you for supporting us then. Thank you for supporting us now. I'm grateful to you guys. I am a big proponent, as you all know, who came to our grand opening, June the 1st. By the way, we're going to have a 1-year anniversary. We're going to celebrate Mount Pleasant one more time, out loud and real loud. So please come. Last thing I'll say is, just for all of you, I believe in Mount Pleasant. I want to see us grow. I want to see us grow smart. I want to see us give opportunities for folks, from the folks who work in my restaurant to the folks who work at Diamond Sea, to the folks that work at Pilgrim, and the folks that are going to work in the business that are coming here. So I'm grateful for every one of you. I know you will take every smart idea that you have into effect as you go forward for growth in Mount Pleasant. And thank you again for welcoming us.
Thank you, sir.
I just moved to this community not too long ago, and just found out that you guys had a project going on in the last 3 weeks about the development. And I came from an area that I was involved in. I ran for mayor, matter of fact, of Palmdale, California. So I've been politically involved, and I'd like to be politically involved here with you and help you. But when you're doing the development, I've seen a couple of places where I see some errors, okay, that could be maybe corrected before you move on with your development totally. And I'd like to be work with the developer and help her with that. I'd like to know how he's financing it so that I could help and assist with that if I need to, because I know how to go about doing that. So I'd like to help and assist with that if I can. I don't want to be in your way. Don't want to stop it. I think it's a good thing, okay? But I think I can help and assist some, and I'd like to do that. I know you're looking at EV5 funding. I've been involved in 4 different projects that only one of them were successful using that type of money. So I'd like to be able to help with keeping any landmines, might help there. So my name is Steve Hansen, and I live at 2304 McKellar Road, okay? And I'll leave you my number if you want to write it down. It's 661-703-9723, and Ed has my card, okay? But I'd be happy to help. One of the couple of things I've seen that are faults, you can bringing in about 10% if you develop that out, more people into your community than what you have as far as residential, and you do not have a place for fire or police. And I've been involved in those before, and I would think a little substation for the police would be a big thing that would probably be needed, because the impact of how much residents will be there, and the fire would probably be something you need to really address also. And I saw those, there's others, but those are a couple of the items that I could help you and assist you with, okay?
Certainly, thank you, sir. Annie, did you have someone else? You'll have to hold that button, I'm sorry. You'll have,
I gotcha. All right. Hey, guys. My name is Jace Merritt. I own a business here in town and have actually done a couple of small subdivisions on the north side of town. I've actually been a farmer for the last 15 years, but just wanted to make a quick statement. I'm actually from West Texas originally. I've been out here about 2 years in Mount Pleasant, and we moved here because a lot of the towns in West Texas where we're from are dying. Nobody's willing to spend money on them and invest, and Mount Pleasant seemed like a town where people are willing to invest and people are coming back to work, and so we wanted to be a part of something like that. And I've actually was going to do a small subdivision out here by the water tower. Ended up not doing it. It was going to be about 120 homes. I was going to spend $3.2 million on a road and water. And I just think to have a planned subdivision that somebody's willing to spend $250 million on is pretty unique for a town the size of Mount Pleasant. And I just think we're pretty blessed to have someone that's willing to do that. I also think, from what I understand, and I don't know all the details, that Mount Pleasant has already spent a lot of money to get the sewage system set up for that area. And if we don't allow a developer to be able to develop that, how is Mount Pleasant going to be able to pay for that? How are you going to get those tax dollars back? That $10 to $40 million that I've heard that Mount Pleasant's going to have to spend on that sewage system. And so I think, just from what I hear, I've heard the zoning has already been approved, but what I think that the city council is voting on is whether or not to sell that land to make the road where Christus can come in and where he can put the walking trails in and the marina in. And so I think, the vote is whether or not not whether or not the development can be done, because it can be done, that the zoning was approved. It's whether or not it can be done right, whether the road can go where it needs to go, where Christus can come in, where businesses will be willing to invest in that side of town. Thank you guys for your time. That's my humble opinion. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, sir. Okay, I think that concludes yeah, I didn't see you down there. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Christy Stutz, 240 County Road 2340, Mount Pleasant. I have had the pleasure of working with John Anderson for several years, and he has a really big heart for this town and all of the people in it. He wants nothing more than to see this community prosper. Tonight is a pivotal moment for Mount Pleasant. This opportunity does not come every day for our city. The last major development in this town occurred over 40 years ago. We have a developer that is willing to dedicate time and advance our city's growth and prosperity. It's within your reach today to ensure that this development reaches its utmost potential. Council members, I ask for you to consider the deal points of this development agreement and make the best decision for our community. Personally, as a parent of young children, I'm eager to witness Mount Pleasant's growth and the opportunities it can provide for the future. This development serves as a catalyst for that growth and enabling families to thrive and prosper within our community. I admire each of you sitting in those seats tonight, and I hope that you make the best decision for our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rocky Irvin. I'm from Pearly, Texas, which is what I'd consider a perimeter area for Mount Pleasant. There are thousands of us out there. And every day when we decide to go to town to buy dinner or to do some shopping or to do whatever we do in life, we're torn between a Sulphur Springs or a Paris or a Longview or a Gilmer. You get the drift. So a development that comes along that's the quality that this development is going to be, that's done right, could be the difference between bringing more people in to do business in this town. So I just want to let you know that I'm a firm supporter of this project, and I'm 100% behind it.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, sir. Hold me just 1 second, sir. Yeah, you'll have to hold that down.
Can you hear me now? Okay, thank you. My name is Joe Mack Duncan. I've lived here all my life here in Mount Pleasant. I am definitely for this this progress that John's trying to help the city with. I think it's an opportunity to help lower our taxes, because without businesses and people here in Mount Pleasant that's willing to invest in the businesses that help decrease the taxes here in Mount Pleasant, I think it's a great opportunity for more medical that we're definitely in need of for. And I think if we pass this up, it's going to be a big loss to Mount Pleasant. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Do we have anyone else? Okay, did you have anyone online?
No, sir, it was just several people who wanted y'all to know that they were in support of the development.
Okay, thank you. All right, at this time, we'll go ahead and close item 2 on the agenda, and we'll be moving on to item 3. Item 3 is to consider pay request number 4 and final pay request from Autohoven Oilfield System Service Incorporated for work on Big Tex lift station improvements.
Mayor, Councilor, Mr. Thatcher, we're bringing this pay request to y'all for the Big Tex lift station improvements. This is the final one for this project, in the amount of $48,234.24. Original contract for this project was $399,868.38, and as included in this request is a deduct change order in the amount of $15,407.15. This is to account for quantities not installed on the project and just kind of settling up books and making sure that they can close out. So billings to date is for this project is including this pay request is $384,461.23. That's approximately 96% of the total. So we're under the construction budget allocated for this project. Contract timeline was 240 calendar days, and per date of request, they have utilized all of this time. This project's actually been done for quite a while, and there was some material delays for some additional pumps that we brought to y'all previously. That has been completed and delivered to the city and allow for closeout of the project. The city has received the executed certificate of substantial completion. Final walkthrough was performed last year, August 28th, 2023. As I said, this has been done for a little bit. And punch list items are confirmed to be complete on February 6th, 2024, which included the confirmation of receipt of pumps. Warranty of 1 year is established from August 28th of 2023 upon council approval, since it was the final walkthrough was performed back in August. And the city has received the contract work acceptance letter from KSA stating that the work has been completed in accordance with project requirements. We have reviewed the quantities and reviewed the overall pay request and found it to be accurate and recommend acceptance in accordance and accordingly.
So we have, 6 months left on the warranty on this right now?
Yes, sir.
We haven't had any problems with it?
No, I have not. Not at that stage. I would be the one thing. Does that include? That's the overall construction of the project. That does not include the warranty on the pumps. I don't have the dates for the warranty on the pumps, but that started as soon as the city received.
All right, council. We have any further questions?
do you think that what we have there now is gonna be adequate to, we had so many previous issues with that station?
Yes, ma'am. I do believe that the what's been installed now will accommodate for current needs and future needs, as well as be durable in placement and making sure that we don't have pumps go out going forward.
Okay, have anyone else? All right, floor will be open for a motion on this item.
I'll move the pay request number 4 on big text lift station.
I'll second that motion.
All right, got a motion made by Councilman Adams, second by Councilman Dale. Madam Secretary, record a vote, please.
Aye.
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 Aye. Vote is unanimous. I'll go ahead and close that item on the agenda. Thank you, Jake. We appreciate you. All right, next item on the agenda will be item 4, which is a discussion and consider approval of the Anderson Town Crossing Development Agreement with Anderson Town Partners, LLC. Mr. Thatcher.
Mayor and City Council, this item is on the agenda for your discussion and approval. In the comments from the public, we had several that spoke on this item, probably thinking they weren't going to get another chance to do it, but this is the time we have for comments on this, and then following the comments, it'll be open to the council for discussion and then a vote for this project. We've been 4 years working on this. It was December 2019 when they came, and we've been working with them since. So, and you're all aware of the issue, so just turn it over to you, and we can listen to the public.
All right, this is again the discussion portion of this item agenda, and if we have anyone that want to speak on this agenda item, please do so at this time.
Good evening. I'm Jerry O'Connor. I do live out in the county on County Road 3245. Thank you for giving me a few minutes for today. 2 weeks ago, I came before you to implore you to do due diligence in considering these PID bonds, and I'm here again to do the same. To be successful, the city needs to be prepared to manage the process. Having on staff the requisite personnel possessing the knowledge and skills are paramount. That includes identifying pitfalls and the fortitude to correct paperwork prior to being signed. This is not a let's sign it so we can figure out what's in it venture. Communicating with the other taxing authorities, which hasn't been done, is also very paramount because it affects them as well. First, I need to ask you all a question. Is it in the city's immediate plan to upgrade the park by the lake? If so, how is that funding going to come about? If not, don't get caught up in the $500,000 inside this agreement. I'll get to that later. I have just over 30 years experience in intelligence, base operations, and contract management for the Air Force. So it didn't take me long to spot pitfalls in this agreement. Back to the earlier question about the park improvement. In his presentation and on social media, Mr. Anderson has stated he was ready to cut a check for $500,000 to the city to pay for those improvements. A reasonable person would mean that he would be out of pocket for that. However, this agreement actually sets the stage for improvement to areas outside, guaranteeing the establishment of a PID bond and TERS. In principle, this is the very definition of quid pro quo. I do something for you, and in return, you do something for me. This deal is wrought with potholes and schemes. On page 14, it states the developer will be reimbursed $500,000. However, look at the whole picture. The developer has locked the city in to creating PID bonds, setting up a TERS, and then being the sole source. See page 11, paragraph 4.3. It is anticipated to be exempt from competitive building. The developer is established as a sole determination on how much each portion of the construction will cost. Not bad enough? See page 19. Under paragraph 7.2 and 7.3. Cost overruns can be moved to cover cost overruns. This is a huge concern because it takes away any incentive to come in under budget or even on budget at all. He has no skin in the game. Furthermore, as sole source, there's no chance that this would ever come to completion in less than $40 million. Therefore, become an extra burden on the end buyers. This is not a time where 3 minutes count. No, it doesn't. State law. If he gets an hour, we get all the time we need. The rectals state the city may seemingly make it that it's not mandatory to set up PIDs. However, there are paragraphs contained within the agreement stating that the city will develop both PIDs and TERS. So which is it, a may or a will? This document also ties the city to a 50% incremental tax reimbursement for 30 years. Why these terms? The governance entity, the city in this case, is the sole determination on these terms. Make sure it's written how you want it if you decide to go that route. This contract, again, with these perimeters, how does it affect the county and the school districts? This contract is very ambiguous. Zones should be established from the start, and the assessment distributions should be known up front. Are there any areas within the development area which are included or excluded from the PID assessment? If so, housing and commercial lots will have these assessments levied upon them and make up for any that are in the exclusion area, making property costs plus assessments plus HOAs or POAs fees eliminate any affordability. Westlake, one of the examples that the developer has used as a reference, is a great example of exactly what I'm bringing up. Restaurants and other commercial businesses cannot afford the property and the PID assessments to even begin developing to build their building and be profitable in the end, so they've lost interest and not joined in. The last point I want to make, the words bringing increased value in excess of 300 million, that number's been changing, floating, so I'm going to use 300 million as the last I knew it, to the area is a pipe dream that will not come true for decades due to the absence of vertical development or vertical construction. As this is for using in Mr. Anderson's own words, this agreement is for the roads and pipes. In closing, this contract does not serve Mount Pleasant's residents' interests first and foremost. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir.
Good evening. My name is Crystal Tromble, and I am a resident off of County Road 4325. My husband and I are both Navy veterans and are new to this area, having just left California after my husband retired after 23 years of service. I would first like to address the concern about the EB-5 program and of its usage. I am aware that it is a federal program. Being of Italian, Irish, and Polish descent not too far back, I don't have an issue with the immigrant policy. What I do have a problem with is the paying to get ahead of everyone else game. Just because this program is available doesn't make it right to use. The fact that a local or even American businesses or money couldn't be found to do this is like buying an American flag made in China. Why would you do it? I did pose a question to Anderson Town Crossing a couple weeks ago on their Facebook page, attempting to get some clarification on some areas of this project that concerns me. Unfortunately, the response I got was what we call in the military police community verbal judo, or skating around the actual answer. First and foremost, I am very aware of the need for affordable housing for our community. It's one of the most talked about and exciting parts of this program that has the community really excited for this outside of an HEB prospect. From what I could find in my research, the median income for Titus County residents is about $53,000. The average hourly wage here is roughly $17 to $22 an hour, and the 2022 fair rent price for our county for a 2-bedroom home was $757 a month. For a 3-bedroom rental, it was $1,008. 2 weeks ago, it was mentioned at the last city council meeting that if this project got approved tonight, that they would expect to start working on building the 250 apartments in the next 4 to 6 months. I'm not sure how 4 to 6 months out from starting, we still don't have a business plan in place for what the end goal of what the housing availability will be by cost. It's been mentioned several times as far as when asked what type of price range is this going to be. The one consistent thing that has missed from every single conversation is the word affordable. And Mr. Anderson was kind enough to come up and introduce himself and shake my hand right before the meeting today. And he was interested in trying to answer any questions that I had before. And my concern about the lack of word for affordable housing came up. Unfortunately, the response I got was his idea of affordable housing or the lower price range on the home. The 1-bedroom or the smaller size apartment that's going to be available is the lower price range option. And when I specifically said, but are we talking affordable housing for a 4-member family home? And he said, no, we're not looking at making this affordable for the general public for this community. When we're looking at upper income housing and upper income apartments, we need homes that support families of what current jobs are here. If we don't have jobs coming in that are going to pay well and increase salary to make more affordable housing available, we don't need $2,000 a month apartments. I ran on Zillow just before coming in here to get an idea of what's currently available. And there's 7 apartments listed on Zillow from $1,249 a month to $2,200 a month. And they've been on the market for 41 days. It takes a lot of money to be able to afford that. And that is not what the jobs provide here in Mount Pleasant. Mr. Anderson did ask me what I thought would be proper growth for a community like Mount Pleasant. And I did not get to answer when the doors opened, and my response to him would be providing jobs with growth. If you have jobs that pay well, then you can afford to buy the homes, you can afford to buy the clothes, you can afford to shop at the restaurants. You bring in homes worth millions of dollars, $800,000, apartments in the $3,000 range, you're not supporting the local community. They're gonna sit there vacant, and that does not do anything for us. That's just over the top of the head. It sounds good when you say housing. If you continuously leave out the word affordable, you're intentionally misguiding the public support. That's a huge concern. And coming from California, when people would ask where we came from, the first thing I'd say, we just came from California. Y'all look at me like a leper. And I say, wait, we left California for a reason. The Navy sent us there. But y'all keep saying, don't California my Texas. This is how you California your Texas. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Kimberly Haynes. I live on FM 1000 in the Chapel Hill community. First off, can I hand you guys This week, while researching individuals relevant to this development, I ran across this pending litigation involving a known partner. This is just one more example of a really long history of bad business practices.
Mayor, Councilman, my name is Steve Bolster. My address is 1497 County Road 3240, Mount Pleasant, 903-305-5408. I've spoken to you before. I will be brief so that other folks can speak. I'll tell you, this is my home now, and I care about this community. I am before you because I believe this project is doomed to failure and will create a blight on our community. I'm going to briefly tell you why. Mr. Anderson has done wonderful things in the community, but unfortunately has a history of federal tax liens dating back to 2016. I believe one remains for tax period 2021 in the amount of $1,109,316.87. This was as of last week. His associate, Mr. Beatty, has two similar projects stalled and incomplete, with one going on 9+ years. So qualifications of past performance are not good. To complicate this more, the development here is vastly larger than the two ongoing projects that are around DFW and are placed in more affluent and higher demand areas. In addition, these projects are 140 miles away, and I question his ability to manage a new remote project. Third, the proposed contract, in my opinion, is favored heavily towards the developer. In referencing the developer, and I have read this contract, but in referencing the developer, the term may is used. In referencing the city, the term shall is used. I'm not a lawyer. I do play one on TV, but the term shall is binding, and the term may is not. On page 11, section 4.3, subpart D, regarding competitive bidding, this has been mentioned, but I want to drive this point home. This agreement and construction of the authorized improvements, including without limitation, TERS projects and acquisition of the city tract, are anticipated to be exempt from competitive bidding. Any system this complicated, and this project being this complicated, that does not have competitive bidding is automatically badly flawed. There is no mention of rental properties or the setup there that I could find. And lastly, we should not go through with this project because this community does not have commercial demand. It is not likely to succeed, and I'll tell you why. We have a 200-acre business park that I am told has been here for at least 20 years. This project was announced over 3 years ago. There has been no demand for business to relocate in our business park. When you say we need the housing to make it happen, recently on Zillow, there were 255 homes in Mount Pleasant with a median price of $250K. Is that affordable? What is the definition of affordable? My fellow citizen has reached the same conclusion. We have hardworking families with median household incomes of $54,000. Or that translates into $18 to $25 an hour. Personally, being financially, fiscally responsible, the affordable housing for those folks would be between $135K and $150K. I don't have the answer to affordable housing. I don't. I thank you for your time. I have no vested interest in this project or related businesses. I hope the information I have provided is helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, do we have anyone else at this time?
Questions now for the city attorney, as well as legal representation from Mr. Lee Reams, please. Could you advise if you knew and when you knew of the liens against this property of John Anderson's, any previous or current liens with the IRS as we are doing this process tonight? I'll ask the city attorney first, and then I'll also ask Mr. Lee Reams to explain any legal documentation in reference to any IRS liens as we deal with the city's business.
Jerry, you're asking me about, I'm not aware of these. I mean, as far as, this is just an agreement to go forward, and there's title assurances in there, so we're not that far along in it. I'm not aware of those, but we're not there yet on the acquisition.
Ms. Lee Reams, could you advise if you know of any previous liens or current liens or IRS by Mr. John Anderson tonight, please, or any of his associates?
Was brought to my attention yesterday, and so I looked at the real estate records in Titus County. Well, someone in my office did, and discovered that there is it appears that there is a federal tax lien pending against Mr. and Mrs. Anderson for a little over $1.1 million. There were 2 previous tax liens that appear to have been resolved. One for almost $267,000 that related to the tax periods ending in 2019 and 2020. And then prior to that, there was one for just about $120,000 for the tax period ending in 2016.
So you have current verification that there is a 1.1 lien against Mr. Anderson as of tonight?
To the best of my knowledge, that is correct, sir.
Okay, do we have anyone else at this time?
Hello. How's everybody tonight? Councilman, Mayor, City Manager Thatcher. Appreciate you allowing me to come tonight. John Anderson. So the first thing I'll do is address the tax lien. Yes, there is a tax lien. We have been in an agreement with the IRS on that. And so, as most of you know, we had a plane crash in 2022, and spent about 3 or 4 months recovering, and that's when that tax lien came up. And at that time, we've entered into an agreement, and so that's where we're at with that. First thing I'd probably like to, well, let me address a couple of other things too. And so, I can't remember everybody's name, so y'all forgive me. But I did talk to the lady prior to the meeting tonight that came up that was from San Diego. And, so the conversation was, she said, what is affordable housing? And I said, well, there will be a wide range of housing costs. And so, I said, basically how that'll work is the smaller apartments will be the least expensive, and this is just common sense. And all the way up to the single-family homes, the larger homes will be the more expensive homes in there. And so the question was, well, there were no prices given. There was the $3,000 a month pricing and the $800,000. Those are numbers that she came up with. That was never in our discussion. But the question was posed to me, hey, if somebody, I believe it was if somebody had 4 kids, I can't remember, a family of 4. And so I said a larger footprint will cost more money, so that will be more expensive, and that was my response to that. But to me, that only makes sense, is that a larger home is going to cost more money. And the question would be is how does, so if we add 250 to 300 apartments in our first phase, how's that going to help housing in Mount Pleasant? One, it'll be all different sizes, which will be all different footprints, which will be all different ranges in pricing. The other thing I would say is that what that allows for is that allows for a shift in housing. So some people are going to want to live there, some people aren't. Some people are going to want to be in that neighborhood, while some people don't. Well, the people that move to that neighborhood, that frees up other housing. And so basically what it really looks like is if you take all the housing we have now, add 250 to 300 units and shuffle that in a deck, spread it around on a table, really what happens is it all levels out. And so additional housing in our community allows for growth. And that's really where we're bottlenecked right now. Thought of one more thing I needed to say on the tax lien. The tax lien does not affect the property, the development.
Let me ask you one question real quick while we're on that. You said the one that's in jeopardy now, the 1.1 million that's still outstanding. I understood from Ms. Reams there was a $267,000 and also a round figure is $120,000. That didn't have anything to do with the plane crash, did it? That was previous to 2016, I believe she said, in 2019, 2020?
That is correct, and those are paid. They're not outstanding.
I guess my question would still have to be, Mr. Anderson, at that time, what would have caused, not getting into your personal business, but I think it is important to the people that's listening, people that's here to know why.
And you said not to get my personal business, but yeah, you just have. And so here's the question that I'm going to ask you is in regards to the development. And I think this is part of the hurdle that, and so really what's happened in this whole process is for what reasons I don't fully understand, but I think what's happened is we've lost track of, everybody here has lost track of what are we really trying to accomplish. And so what we're trying to accomplish is to build a better Mount Pleasant, number one. And I think everybody agrees with that. The comprehensive growth plan is, y'all set that out in, I believe, 2020, and this development meets all of the desires of the city in that growth plan. And so, but what's happened in this process is due to everybody not agreeing on exactly how to reach that goal is, and then a small group of people that I will say would seek to create division. What's happened is we've started looking at each other as enemies, and we're not. Everybody here wants to build a better Mount Pleasant. And the question is not if we can stand on the sidelines and swap blows and beat one another up. If you want to find something that you think I've done wrong, you can find it all day long. You're not going to have to look very hard. I'm telling you that right now. I'm not perfect, and I'm not standing up here telling you I am. But what I am telling you is I believe in Mount Pleasant. And I believe that together we can build a better Mount Pleasant. I believe that everybody agrees that we need housing. Everybody agrees that we need more commercial. Everybody agrees that the tax base can grow. Everybody agrees with all these things. And if we're sitting on the sidelines, swapping blows, nothing gets accomplished. We don't move forward. No, you know, if you're fighting, progress is never made. And so the development agreement that has been presented to the city has been worked on for 15 months. A lot of time and energy. And of all the times I've been here to talk to the council, not one time has a development agreement been discussed. And so what I would like to do is look at the deal points and talk about the development agreement. Y'all have a financial advisor. You've got someone that came tonight that said, you know, this agreement is not a good agreement for the city. But yet you've hired professionals to work on this that have spent their time. They've had a weekly meeting for 15 months. Your bond consultant, your financial legal team has been in a meeting every week for 15 months to determine what's best for the city, to build an agreement that doesn't have any risk for the city, doesn't have any cost to the city, and there's no way that the city can lose. And so, and what I would like to look at is 15 months worth of work has gone into a development agreement that has been presented by y'all's staff, our staff, y'all's professionals, our professionals, to reach the goals of the city that have been set out by council. And it's been said, hey, these are the goals. This is what we're reaching for. And so we believe we've got a path to meet that. And so what I'm asking to do is, I think Jim Sabonis may be available by Zoom. Is that correct? And so if he's on, what I like to do is actually get y'all's professionals, you know, to explain in the agreement. And, you know, I don't think it's too much to ask for everybody. So I'm listening to what y'all have to say. And if everybody listens and everybody works together, we can create a path to get growth, to get all these things in place. But as long as we're fighting on the sideline trying to pick holes in each other, Mount Pleasant will never be successful until we work together. And so if Jim's on the line, what I'd like to do is get Jim to come on and explain what the PID is, what the cost is, what the risk is to the city. I think that's the big thing right now.
John, I would like to ask another question or a couple of questions before we get Mr. Sabonis on there. Talking about these development agreements, do you think it'd be a fair assessment, a fair statement to say that this development agreement has changed a number of times over the last 4 years?
The development agreement has only been worked on for the last 15 months. Hasn't been worked on, and so since it started, it's been a constant negotiation of, hey, let's figure out a path to everybody being happy and it working. So yes, it's just like any other document to reach a goal that everybody is happy with and everybody feels good about. It's back and forth, red lines, back and forth, let's change this, let's do this. And that's why it takes 15 months, because it is carefully considered. It's not something that's been just tossed together, but only 15 months has this been worked on.
Again, I've got to come back to the tax lien. I think that's definitely the elephant in the room right now. I definitely think that has to have some bearing. We can get our legal advice on that through Mr. Sabonis and also through Lee Reams and Mr. Wooten if we need to. I think the past definitely has a bearing on the future. I don't think there's any question, or I haven't had much question about, do we need housing, affordable housing, and do we need infrastructure out there, such as grocery stores, restaurants, etc. Everyone's in agreement, and I'm gonna make a statement that you and I talked a few days ago on the phone for 45 minutes or so. And a statement that was made, you told me that you knew I didn't like your, and a lot of people may not know, but you've got a partner, Michael Beatty, and I told you that absolutely wasn't true. I don't know your partner, Michael Beatty. I think he's here tonight. I don't know your partner, Michael Beatty, but I don't approve of some of his past business practices, is what I've told you. And I want that to be on the record. I don't know Mr. Beatty, so I don't dislike him, and I certainly don't dislike you. But some of these business practices, and one we got handed a minute ago, the public hadn't seen, is a tax lien here against the United States government, a realtor against Mr. Beatty, which is a partner in this. And I would just ask for the public, of those that don't know, what percent are you and Mr. Beatty in partnership in this? I believe it was 50% each.
That is correct. First off, I'll say that Mr. Beatty was here several times, but he was here in May or June because the council wanted to ask him questions. So he was here, and many questions were asked of him that night, maybe 30 minutes or an hour. And so I don't think it's any secret that Mike Beatty is my partner, because he's been here to council, publicly appeared and talked to and answered any questions that were given.
Yes, sir, that's exactly correct. For those of you that wasn't here in the past, at that time, the council members were here. And what I understood at that time, the main question was, and the reason we had him here, was his delinquency on property taxes and other taxes over in Dallas area. I think you reconfirmed this with me the other day on the phone. It was $2.5 to $3 million that was laid on, that was paid in maybe April or May of last year. It finally got settled, and we asked why that was like that. What took so long? I mean, in most good business practices, a person does anything within their possible means to reach out and grab money and not be delinquent and pay excessive penalties, fines, plus not only getting mud on their face, but also getting a black eye in certain instances. And I think all parties that night understood that was a black eye. That it, you have to look back at the past and understand where you're going for the future. And if that has had problems in the past, again, like I told you, I don't approve as a businessman of those type business practices when you're coming forward and going to a $285 to $300 million project. And don't get me wrong, $2.5 to $3 million is a lot of money. But in the scheme of this project here, not to be able to come up and be able to pay those taxes in a timely manner has to raise an eyebrow on any good business person, John.
So I think the misconception on the Mike Beatty deal, everybody keeps saying that Mike Beatty started that project 10 years ago.
No, sir, I never said that. In fact, I believe that project was maybe passed off, or he bought that project from, I believe you told me, about $50 million.
That is correct. And so it's been said here tonight by somebody. I shouldn't have said everybody, but somebody. Somebody said that project started 10 years ago or something like that. Somebody that spoke tonight has said that. And they said that project, I think it was maybe the gentleman on the back row, I'm not sure, but anyway. And so Mike Beatty, and he's here. And so Mike Beatty, he was hired to help with that project after it started, but he was not the owner. He did not make the decisions. And then he agreed, because through that process of 7 or 8 years, the developer and those two cities had gotten to a point that they didn't agree. And so what had happened over that time period is city managers had changed, mayors had changed, council had changed. And so the previous developer got to the point where he didn't feel like he was able to make any progress. So Mike felt like he could resolve those issues and move forward. And so 16 months ago, which was in September a year ago, Mike bought that project. And so it's my understanding that Mike bought the projects, those two projects together in a bundle for $50 million, and through land sales and some other things, those projects were paid off in actually 3 months. The tax that was overdue is a result of, that was a time when interest rates went up. And so banks pulled back, lending tightened up, and the deals he had in any business, you're going to project your income, and the deals that he had projected to close did not close. And so because of that change in banking and change in lending policy, you know, in general, those were closed maybe 3 or 4 months later. And at that point, I think it was, I don't know because I wasn't directly involved, but I think it was in the neighborhood of $3 million was paid within a few months. And since that time, there have been no delinquencies as far as Mike goes on those taxes. But I think the misconception is not everybody, but it's been said repeatedly that, you know, those projects are 10 years old and didn't make the progress. Mike's only owned those projects for 16 months. So we're ready to hear from Jim about the risk and the cost to the city. And this is what I'm proposing to you, is in this agreement, there's no downside. You're not voting on whether you like me. You're not voting on whether you like Mike Beatty. You're not voting on whether you know, our funding source. None of that stuff's being voted on here tonight. What's being offered to the city is an agreement that includes the city receiving funds, which will be at no cost and no risk to the city, which would allow for an efficient development process for this property and would allow for a nice mixed use plan development, exactly where everybody thinks in Mount Pleasant should develop. And so where we're really at right now is what's being offered, and I'll let your advisor discuss the risk and the cost and the reward. But I'm asking you, if there's no cost and there's no risk and there's only upside, and nobody can say, hey, there's a downside that I see, why would the city not want this?
John, I just have to say before we get him online here, or I'm sure he's already there, he'll hear what I've got to say. I've made this comment to you, and I've made it to several others over the last few days. I've been involved in a lot of businesses over the last 45 years. I've never been involved in a project that had a dollar attached to it that didn't have some degree of a downside. And it's hard for me to think, and I ask you that, it's hard for me to believe or to think that there's absolutely no downside, period, to the city. As I look over and I've researched this development agreement, I've probably spent 4 to 5 hours looking at this new one that we got last Thursday and comparing it to the previous ones, et cetera, and so on. So that's I've just never been, and no one that I've talked to, that I've asked this question to, that's been in business, agrees with the statement that there just is no downside, period, to this type of project.
I would ask that you don't take it from me, that you take it from your side. And so let's ask him and let's see what he says.
Development agreement. Inside there, it says with the terms in reference that you were supposed to, that the county may or they may not be consulted. Has anyone contacted the county to know if they're paid or not?
We've not talked to the county while going through this process, and so we talked to them last summer, and it was discussed and it was mentioned, but from that point forward, we've been working toward our agreement with the city because the county's position has been get past your stage with the city, and then we want that completed first. And so
when it says it may, so if we approve it tonight, the county part won't affect if we've already had an approved document.
I think Jim Sabonis is probably the best person to answer that, which is your, I disagree. I disagree with most of what was said in the beginning. It was, some things that most of it wasn't 100% accurate. And so there were bits and pieces of bits and pieces that's what was given in the first. But Jim Sabonis can surely answer those questions. That's his business and that's what he does for a living.
Whoever asked that, yes, sir, I'll read it. Matter of fact, this is part of out of the development agreement, and I'll be happy to read it for those, or John can if you'd like for me to, or you could, John. It's in the development agreement. This part here isn't? Okay, in the normal one? Okay. Would you like to read it, or?
I don't have any desire to read. I think we got Jim on the phone. It makes more sense to ask the legal professional.
We'll ask him, and then we'll ask him this question here and see if there's any, legitimacy to it.
Mayor, this is Jim with Hilltop. I'm ready when you're ready for me to speak.
You're welcome to start.
Well, good evening, Mayor, council members, and citizens of Mount Pleasant. I'm Jim Sabonis with Hilltop Securities. I lead a team of professionals from Hilltop who are the financial advisor to the city. And we've been for many years. And to give you a little background for those who talk about experience, I and a group of my coworkers, we actually created the first PID transaction in the state of Texas, the modern PID transaction. We also developed the first and implemented the first PID TERS transaction. And we've been involved in a couple hundred of them. And I will say that they are complex, but fortunately, over the years, we've developed and enhanced the documents that have been used with the goal that we isolate the city from financial risks. The city has responsibilities of levying assessments, collecting the assessments, foreclosing if the assessment is not paid. There's the same actual responsibilities they have when they issue ad valorem tax bonds. This team that the city has, their bond counsel, financial advisor, city attorney, they're the most experienced people in the state of Texas representing cities. And that's who I represent. I represent cities and my fiduciary responsibilities as a city. This project has evolved, and the document, I believe, fairly represents what has been conceptually agreed upon by the city and the developer. And let me say that I think it outlines the proposed land use that would be allowed in the area. It indicates that the city will create a PID and a TERS and invite the county to participate in that TERS, and it sets the assessment rates that will be charged in the area, and indicates the potential TERS participation by the county. And it's not actually currently established what the city TERS rate is, and the reason being is that the city has negotiated that $500,000 will be spent upfront as part of the first capital infusion into the project to improve the park. And we'll have final build-out numbers at that time to be able to calculate how we repay this in the TERS. And so, yes, we're going to repay the project, but the money will only be repaid from the incremental ad valorem taxes received from this area. In summary, I believe that this is really a well-structured agreement. It's got the best practices and standards that we use on all our projects, customized for this project. And as your financial advisor, I believe that the document isolates the city from financial risk. And let's talk about what happens. And it's kind of a three-phase process. If the development agreement is approved by the city and a developer and executed, the next step would be to create a PID, and at the appropriate time, then levy assessments. And there will be additional, work done, and a final plan, development plan put in place to levy those assessments. And those assessments, are, at that time, are not involved in a bond issue. They're involved in a reimbursement. So the developer will spend his funds. He would accrue a balance of funds that have been spent that were indicated in the eligible improvements that are allowed by state statute for this plan. And then the landowners at the time, initially himself, but as the land is dispersed to different landowners, they would pay back assessments. City would collect those assessments, and until bonds are issued, they would go into a revenue fund that would pay off the debt. So they pay off that note balance. And the final step would be, it would be bonds be issued. And in the development agreement, it sets a wide range of standards before those bonds be issued. Basically, they have to follow the standard best practice on how bonds will be issued. They have to be deemed creditworthy based on a full due diligence process. And there's some constraints on how the bonds are issued. Those bonds funds would be put into an escrow and would only reimburse for eligible improvements that were completed, inspected, and approved by the city and within the existing budget. So I want to be clear that as financial advisor, we don't judge the merits of the project and whether it's in the city's strategic plan. But I do think that at this time, this document relates to what has been agreed to, and it positions the city to go to the next step to create it. There will be a lot of intermediate steps that come forward, and each time those intermediate steps take place, that are anticipated and indicated in the agreement, there will be additional due diligence and information that takes place. And I'll just make a couple of general comments. In having worked my entire career in municipal finance, dealing with cities primarily, working with the developers, we go through due diligence, and we've learned a lot of things about developers that we were surprised by. And again, they're business people, and we've learned that the business people have lawsuits and liens and a variety of things. But I want to understand that at the time, if bonds were sold, the primary credit is the lien on the property. The property is not the developer. We'll do our due diligence and be assured that we believe the developer can make the payments. But the reality is the land is the value, and if payments are not made, the city has the responsibility of foreclosing on the property and selling it to repay any past due assessment. And it's just like taxes. If land is foreclosed on, it doesn't accelerate the lien, it just repays any past due assessments. It's what makes these real creditworthy. But Mayor and Council, I commend your staff. They've worked on this for a long time. And there still are questions about the project and still information that needs to be gathered. But I would say, as your financial, I'm comfortable saying at this stage, if you choose to support the project, the development agreement accurately reflects what has been discussed and agreed to, and protects the city from any financial risk, liability, or financial involvement besides the minor TERS allocation to fund the improvements in the park that have been agreed to. And again, the thought is that those $500,000 would be funded and would be at risk of the developer to be repaid. So, it's we can go to specific sections, but I'd really like to open up, Mayor, for you and your council for any questions you have about the agreement or any aspects of the project financially.
All right, thank you, Jim. Councilor, do we have any questions at this time for?
Thank you, Mr. Simonis. Tim Dale. I do have a question. In your professional opinion, if in the event that a foreclosure had to happen on this property for non-payment, anything to do with tax lien, does it or could it affect the city's bond ratings going forward?
Mayor, actually, unfortunately, I have experience with that. I've actually been, and my team has been engaged by a couple communities in Texas that didn't, we weren't involved in the original issuance, but we've helped them work through some challenges. And I would say to you that my experience is that we'll be judged on how we fulfill our responsibilities. Our responsibilities are to evaluate a project, which we've done, to document it appropriately as it being proposed, to levy assessments and to collect those assessments. Again, part of this process will be hiring a third-party assessment consultant that will collect them, and the part of the process also would be that there would be an agreement with the tax assessor collector to collect the assessments as part of the overall tax bill. And unfortunately, Mount Pleasant is like every Texas city. You know, it's not something we like to discuss, but there's some delinquencies in every community, no matter where you are. And the city goes through a standard embedded practice that you have right now to deal with delinquency. And ultimately, after a few steps, contacting, request, there's a foreclosure process. So if we go through with that process, just as we do with any property tax, then we fulfill our responsibilities and we move forward with whoever purchased a project in the second. So my thought is that one aspect is part of my responsibility as a registered investment advisor is that when we are involved in projects, we can only participate in projects that do three things. One, that are the best interest of our client. Two, that our client understands the pros and cons and all aspects of it. And three, that can implement it. And this falls into the third area. If I thought that the city could not or would not foreclose on the property, I would recommend against it. But this is clearly a situation where you've got good professionals on staff and hired good external professionals to assist you. And I believe that those will go forward. In the cases that were difficult and we worked through, there was no impact on their bond rating, no impact on their access to capital. It was just, the fact of the matter is just a little additional work for the staff and its consultants behind the scenes to resolve that situation. And in fact, the way these agreements are structured is that our only responsibility would be the foreclosure. If bonds are issued, the document would state that the trustees involved in the reorganization of the process. So our sole role would be foreclosure, with the trustee who represents the majority of bondholders evaluating and working through the stage. And it's done that way on purpose because we want to have just the minimum required responsibility. So to answer your question, this document and the current standard structured in Texas for PID bonds doesn't have financial liability, has responsibilities, and the same responsibilities the city has on all its debt outstanding, levy and collect and pay bondholders.
Jim Sherry Spruill, if you would refresh my memory about your fee in a project like this, would you please explain to us how you will be compensated if on this particular project?
Our agreement with the city is an ongoing contract, and we get paid if and when bonds are funded as a cost of issuance. And in general, it's a standard process for any professional, bond counsel, rating agencies, underwriters who work with cities with bonds, since it's not a budgeted ongoing cost, that there's a standard contract that we're paid based on that fee schedule if bonds are paid and closed from the proceeds of the transaction.
So, in everyday terms, you get paid if and when a bond is issued. If it does not, if this did not pass, would you be will you be billing, the city of Mount Pleasant for the time and effort you've put into it up until now?
No, there's no fee due or requested for the work we've done now or in the future for any ongoing work we do with the city, unless it involves bonds.
Mr. Sabonis, let me follow up on her question there. I think, just for clarity with the public here, and I guess myself too, I'm sure people do want to know, just out of curiosity, what would that percentage be on a $40 million PID bond? What would the normal customary fees be of an entity such as Hilltop Security to receive with one of these projects?
Yeah, our standard fee for all non-rated development-related projects, whether they're PID bonds or special districts, municipal managers, would be 2% of the par amount of bonds sold. It's a different fee schedule than when we issue bonds for the city, which is a high investment grade credit. It's justified due to the amount of work and to the risk as professionals we have involved in this process versus what we do on the city's ongoing issuances. But it's a standard fee, not just for us, but I would say for all my paraprofessionals that do what I do and do similar jobs for other clients in other cities in Texas.
No, I totally understand that, and I respect that and know that you have to be compensated for, but I think people might wanted to know, what it was. I appreciate you sharing that 2% of, and this project is up to $40 million. And am I understanding this PID bond that these funds can be requested at any given time by one lump sum or multiple disbursements?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and let me say, what I anticipate the plan, and I believe the developer and his consultants are present at the city council, is that there may be a two-phase issuance. I don't believe the full 40 million will be issued. I believe there'll be initial issuance of assessments levied for major improvements over the project to put in the roads and infrastructure to allow development. And then my understanding, there will be a second, what we call phase improvements for put over the, which would have an incremental assessment level over the residential and multifamily homes. But that second additional phase will not go to the mixed use commercial. And it's a typical process we see in these type of projects, and does it, again, to be fair, everyone would be assessed, but in that case, the capital that is funded from the assessments of the mixed use projects, that would actually be funded by the developer in this case. So you'll release their lien in that process. And John or any of your team there, I believe that reflects my latest understanding of what your proposed plan would be. Somewhere in the 20 million total range or above that, but the two-phase major improvement and then a phased over the single family and multifamily.
Roy's pulling it up right now, Jim.
Jim, I'm not sure my Wi-Fi is going to connect so I can see the document, but the shorter answer is I don't think there's any expectation to go anywhere close to 40 million. I think 20 might have been the number. I have a major improvement levy of about $8 million, and then I think I have a direct improvement levy about $6 million. So we might be even $15 million. It might be max of the levy.
Let me ask you real quick, why would this be up to 40 million if you're only gonna need 15? Why don't we put 15 in there?
Well, I think when we put the original number in, Councilman, I think we weren't sure. Yeah, I understand. I understand. When that number went in there originally, we had a different structure to the transaction. We were gonna finance more things through the improvement, through the bid, and some of the use changed, and I don't know that we've ever changed that. We do like to leave a little bit of room above the number just in case costs increase or something minor changes, but to your point, I don't think there would be an objection to lowering the number to a number that would be closer to what I think we're intending to build at. I
understood what you did there a little bit, but from 15 million to 40 million, to me, it's more than a little bit. Maybe I'm confused on dollars.
I don't think you are. I think when we originally put the $40 million number, I think we were anticipating costs to be somewhere in the $30 million range. And so we set it there so that we had some room for cost increases, and it never got revisited, frankly.
I understand that, but I'm looking at a Anderson Town Crossing Development Agreement that's gonna be, that wanted to be brought to us. This was the last final draft as of last Thursday. Is that fair to say? Am I not looking at where it says up to 40 million? And am I not looking at what says that it can be done as one draw? And there's not a lot of specifications in there as what would be required to make that one draw or multiple drawers. Now, am I reading this wrong, Mr. Sabonis and Lee?
Yes, you're reading the 40 million, and let me say that it's a not to exceed number. It's not a guarantee, and what will take place from here would be, as they create the PID, they would actually come up and work on a service assessment plan, would detail the actual eligible improvements that can be funded, and would detail the build out. And at that time, the amount will be established by taking the projected build out value of the properties times the approved assessment rate, generating a cash flow that's present value to indicate the actual assessment levy that's put in place. I will say that the difference between the not to exceed and what the end is a common thing we run into, and be very frank, is personally, it's something I see a lot. I will say that I believe from experience and observation, it's good to have a buffer from what is initially anticipated, for the exact reason that if it incents developers to increase the value of their project. For instance, we've seen over the last few years plans that were put together 4 years ago, and based on assessment level and estimated home price, when the home prices have gone up by 30%, we've had to reevaluate that plan. And sometimes I mentioned that there's a disconnect between what's a reasonable buffer and what's going to take place, but at the same time, it is constrained by the assessment level that's being proposed, which, based on my understanding, will generate, as I said, a much smaller actual lien on the property for either assessment, reimbursement, or bond issues.
Jim, this is Galen Adams. I'd like to ask a couple of questions and clarify some things. My understanding is that the PID amount is actually set aside by an administrator himself. He evaluates what the PID should be, and that's where you come up with the amount. Am I correct on that? And then also, I just want to make it clear for the public that the PID money has an administrator. The money can only be spent on that project, has to be approved for that project, can only be given to the developer to do on those specific items. It's not going to be used for anything but that development on infrastructure areas, correct?
Yeah, the easy answer to question number 2 is yes. It's held in trust by an indenture that's predetermined what exactly can be used for and how it can be spent. And I like to make a comment from answer a question someone had it's very common to allow overages to be reallocated among categories within that process. And for the simple reason that there's a verification process when draws are made, where if there's a shortfall of cash in the fund, the developer will only get reimbursed for a proportional cost that was actually allocated. But what's taken place, and you can imagine anyone that's tried to build a home or any construction recently, with escalating costs, there is contingency, but from experience, I've observed that, sewer improvements might come under, paving might come a little bit over, but the service assessment plan will state the maximum for both that can be funded, and it would be reviewed. Those draws will be reviewed, and through a number of processes of people that represent the city to ensure that they're done. And as far as your first question, if the city moves forward prior to setting up the PID, they'll hire a service assessment consultant whose primary responsibility is to put a service assessment plan that actually indicates what the improvements are proposed, what the build out is in detail, what the improvements can be, how they're allocated, and propose the assessment levy. And your staff, your bond counsel, city attorney, everyone will have input into that, but it will be presented for the city council to approve. It'll provide the final detail, exactly what's going to be built and how it's going to be paid for. And that would be a future step that the council will have a requirement and responsibility to review and approve it. And so the city council will get a good look and understanding at that time. And so, yeah, that'll all be done in future steps. Again, the way this would work would be the development agreement, a petition to create a PID, a reimbursement agreement based on that development agreement, and then finally the assessments being put in place, and all those actions will be reviewed, council actions that you'll take every step along the way.
Okay, thank you for your answer. And also, I just want to reiterate, I want to make sure I heard you correctly. You said this was well structured, isolates the city, the bonds have correct?
Yeah, the way I understand it, and I want to be clear, it's changed significantly from staff and city team input and discussions and input back from the developer, and that there's going to be a lower level of assessments done on all the property, but the general infrastructure in, and then at the appropriate time, there'll be a second assessment put in place just on the residential, and to me, that's a more conservative program than putting all the assessments in right up front and assessing all the property. Which couple points to make is that the mixed use component of it we paid for by cash by the developer, and so it's a phase improvements. You'll have a good feel before we do the phase improvements, what the commitments are for the residential and multifamily. So yeah, I think it's a conservative program as you can have for a PID bond issuance.
All right,
And maybe let me rephrase it, put it a little bit differently. That major improvement, upon the completion of that, roads and internal infrastructure of sewer and water would be put in place. Some of the internal features would not be done at that time, but you'll have an improved site that's ready for development, an enhanced piece of property with low level assessments, and at the appropriate time when they're ready to go vertical with the single family and multifamily, they'll come forward and say they want to do the second levy for those partials. So it's a phased approach, appropriate with the potential risk of improving the property initially and then committing to the final assessments after there's commitments to go forward on the residential and multifamily.
Jim, I have one more question. Tim Dale. On this TERS creation, I see in the development agreement that I'm looking at, the most current one, that we're looking at a figure here. What would you say, or would you know, what is the normal administration fees for administering from a third party, whether it's an outside party or it's our appraisal district? What is a normal fee for these type of administration fees, and for how long?
Well, I'm glad you asked that comment, because it's the one comment I made on the development agreement and our city staff and professional preparatory teams call, in that I believe the current agreement sets a maximum of $2,500 a year for the TERS.
Yes, sir. And I guess that
paid
was
by
my
participant. And let me say that this should be straightforward, simple, limited number of parcels, and I do think it'd be efficient. At the same time, I recommend in this case, and in any case of my client, that the city, their goal is to always work efficiently, and to take off the cap and just say that you have to have, we're gonna have faith. There's times in these agreements where you have faith. They're gonna have the faith that the city's gonna do it the most efficient way. Generally, the TERS is done by the PID a consultant, because they have all the parcel information and they do interrelated calculations on how these are done. So I would tell you off the top of my head, I don't think, if we had 500 parcel residential property, it might be $15,000. This will be less. Will it be more than 2,500? It may be, but more importantly, I think my recommendation was that would be deleted, that limit, and that the developer would recognize one of their as their partner, that we're going to do it as efficiently as possible, and we'll just work from that perspective.
Yes, sir. I appreciate that, Jim. I guess my concern on this, as I read this, like I said several times, for it to soak in a little bit with me. But when I saw $2,500, I'm not really questioning that might be a good dollar amount today in 2024. But I question again, I'm believing this may be over a 30-year period. And I don't know that $2,500, if it keeps going the way the CPI has over the last few years and the way things have gone up, I think that's going to be a drop in the bucket of what it's going to cost to administer that fund. And if it does, it states right here, there's no escalator, but there's nothing built in on this that says every 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, or et cetera, what that cost is going to be. And I feel like, again, I'm looking out for the taxpayers is what I'm asking this for. Then what burden, as we know, without even asking the question, I think we all know it, who would be paying that? It would be the taxpayer.
No, I appreciate it. I'm very respectful and thankful that you mentioned it. Again, there are a limited number of parcels that will ultimately be built out, and that cost should be minor. And actually, the combined PID and TERS assessment it could be reasonable. I will say that my experience in other processes was that we might come in at the 2,500 only incremental amount. I think could be done, but again, as you indicated, escalation, a variety of factors, and that again, agreement of this nature. There's a lot of stated constraints and some things that we have to agreement we both do efficiently and best we can at the time. And I think this is a scenario where the city would engage professional and have them officially price this transaction, that cost.
Thank you. And I'm going to end up my questions here in a minute and turn it. I've got another question here for John or the team or you or Lee on this city park project improvement. I appreciate the fact that they're putting in $500,000 for this park. From what I read in this, the city is 100% responsible for the construction of this park. As I read in here, for the creation of the city to provide developer with construction plans, specifications, etc. for the city park project improvement. The city will agree it will complete the construction of the city park project improvement within 1 year. All the monkey is on the city's back to do this. I mean, I appreciate y'all giving the money, But when this park is built out there, again, I'm just asking, is this not a gift that keeps on giving? You know, that we have to, that the city has to continue to maintain, and I'm not saying, I'm asking these questions a lot of them from the citizens, okay? Is this not a gift that maybe keeps on giving, where it does require more manpower, more labor, you know, upkeep, maintenance? I saw in there's retention ponds, et cetera, like that HOA and POA will be involved in. And to be honest, I didn't realize that HOA and POA was involved in these up until just a week or two ago. And as people know, those are homeowners associations, and basically, for lack of a better term, business associations that pay for irrigation, landscape, upkeep of commons areas, retention ponds, so forth and so on. And that assessment will be on top of, again, all the valorem taxes, and also on top of the PID bonds, in which we've talked about $1.19. I think I saw that still in here, $1.19 per 100, and based on a $250,000 home, that would be around $2,995. So let's just say $3,000 a year on top of your regular taxes, plus an HOA fee that the homeowners will be assessed. And HOAs aren't uncommon. A lot of us live in HOAs, but I'm just saying that's an added expense that people have questioned me and asked me, would there be an HOA or a POA?
That is correct. There will be an HOA and a POA. And that is, you know, as you say, and that, at this point in time, any city that of any size requires that now. It's not a question. And I can address here in just a second, when we finish with Jim, I can address the PID, you know, as far as the assessment goes, how that affects the pricing and all those things.
Mayor, this is Jim. I'd like to talk a little bit about the city tours, and and let me just explain my understanding of what took place. Is that the city would like the park improved. The developer committed to assist by funding it up front and only being paid back from a portion of the incremental taxes on his project. The number of 500,000 was a number that was just discussed in a meeting, thinking 200,000. Again, I'm putting words in I don't want to put words in somebody's true to, but just what is the dollar amount is yet to be defined. And again, that the thought was that if this was agreed to, the city would work on a plan to improve that park and determine it. And the way language should be written, my understanding is that the city can make the improvements and they would be funded by the developer, or if the developer can do it cheaper, allowing more improvements to be made, contract with the developer, a variety of ways to have that done. And then lastly, that when it comes to maintaining the park, this is a focal point on the Attorney General on these type transactions. This is expected to be a public park available for all the citizens, and that the population that will live in the PID is a very minor part of the overall city's population. So to be fair, they can only be burdened a very minor part of this. And the thought is that this will be a public park available to anyone in the city to use. So there's been clear discussions that it can't overburden the people in the facility. This is not a pocket park that they have access to and limit others to. This, my understanding, will be available to all, and the proposed improvements will be there for everyone in the community.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Did you have anything? Okay. Do you have anything for it? Go ahead.
So Jim, just as a summary, is it fair to say that there's no risk to the city and there's no cost to the city? The development agreement was set out to, those fees that are annual fees and the setup fees, we've agreed to pay those, and those were actually on our part, and I'm not asking this question, but on our part, we called to see what those were, and that's how those numbers were come up with, and if they need escalators, we wouldn't have
I
an aversion.
I want to be very clear in that the way this document is structured and future follow-up agreements would be put in place, the city has no financial responsibility for paying the assessments. The city has, and no money can be used to pay those assessments in taxes or sales tax or anything else. What the city is responsible for is the administration of this process. And so what we will be responsible for is the levy assessments, and the collection of those assessments, and either putting them in the project fund to reimburse the developer if no bonds are issued, or to allow them to flow to the trustee to pay bondholders if issued. So there are some responsibilities when a city issues bonds. We have IRS compliance, we do arbitrage rebate, continuing disclosure, all things that we do for any bond issue that we have, and the city does competently on an ongoing basis right now. And so the answer to the question would be there's no financial payment risk. We have responsibilities and requirements whenever a city issues bonds. And my belief, having worked the city, you fulfill those currently to the standard requirement, and you would do it in this case too. So again, the places where a city has risk in these type projects, if it's unwilling to meet the requirements stated in the indenture, which involves the collection and potential foreclosure for non-payment, and that's something that if the city said we don't want to do that, then I would say not go forward with the process. But it's something you do in every, unfortunately, whether it's any business or resident, they'll follow the same procedures that you have somewhere else.
So the funds would be used for public infrastructure only. That's the law. And
Public infrastructure that it would be PID eligible. It's a subsection of overall infrastructure.
And so the city would be receiving public infrastructure, and the only collateral for that would basically be our property. The collateral for that would be on us, not on the city.
I have a question now, man. Could I ask Mr. Lee Reams to come up, please? The legal representative for the city, please.
Yes, sir.
Have you had a chance to review this development agreement? And could you tell us the pros and cons that you see from the legal side from the city as the legal representative for the city tonight?
So first, let me say that I've only been involved or asked to be involved in the recent, I guess, since sometime in February and now. And so to me, there's some issues about the way that some of the language in the agreement is set forth. For example, we talk a lot, there's language in here that says that the developer will be just simply reimbursed after expenses are made, but there's language in 6.1C that says that the city shall, in certain instances, either could be asked to fund with the bonds or reimburse. And so there, it would, that kind of language, and I think there's other instances of that type of language that are not as clear. Now, what I understand Mr. Sabonis to be saying is that some of this will be worked out in subsequent agreements. Honestly, I think from the city council's perspective, the language in this agreement needs to be where the city wants it to be. in order to approve it. You know, sometimes these things do get complicated and there can be problems, and this will be a governing document. And so, and there have been, I believe, I think it's from what I've seen and my brief involvement with it, there have been a lot of revisions, a lot of changes to the structure, to the terms, and it is a very, you know, it's a large agreement. It's significant in size. And so I think that there's, if the city were inclined to move forward with the agreement, that it needs to hone in on some of that language and make sure that it's clear before it's approved. And, you know, there have been a lot of these meetings, weekly meetings, but, you know, when this was presented, I think in early February by Mr. Anderson, and, you know, he came and presented to the city. He presented it more from the standpoint of why development in the city would be good, not about the agreement itself. And so, you know, I think the city really needs to understand what those terms are and understand what it's getting itself into. I think there are other costs to be incurred from an administrative standpoint. As Mr. Sabonis noted, the limitation that's stated in there of $2,500, I think that's too restrictive. And, you know, that's just an example of something that needs to be clarified. I think there are other things. The issue that was raised about the federal tax lien that is pending against Mr. Anderson. You know, he stated that that none of the property he has been affected by the tax lien, but honestly, what the tax lien literally states is that it attaches to the taxpayer's property, and all rights to property. And so, you know, I think this is not something that the city was aware of prior to yesterday, and it's a significant issue. It could impede the project. It could impair the project, and it's something that I think the city needs to be fully aware of and know what the legal consequences are, and how that could impact. I don't know in detail what Mr. Anderson's relationship, you know, is to the developer. I understand he's a principal. He would be signing the development agreement. And, you know, that's a significant issue. It's a significant concern to come up this late in the process. The lien has been on file since about this time last year, March of last year. And so, you know, it is what it is. But it's something that the city needs to really be able to evaluate and ensure that it's not getting itself into a complicated problem that could involve the IRS. I mean, tax liens are extremely powerful. They're the greatest, you know, the strongest type of lien that can be asserted. And, you know, what impact that could have on this agreement, I cannot tell you. All I can say is that it is concerning. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's my best shot right now.
Okay, thank you, Lee. Did you have anything else?
I point out that in the last 15 months, Jeff Golbus has been the city's legal attorney for this, and he's not available tonight, so he wouldn't be able to respond to any of those.
Let me ask you, just on behalf of the public, is Mr. Golbus aware of your tax situation?
No, sir, not that I'm aware of. I think there were a lot of other questions in there that she raised about language, and I'm saying he could respond to that.
All right. All right, John, did you have anything else? Go ahead.
Certainly, with a question raised about the tax issue, I would understand if the city wanted clarification on that prior to how this would affect this development agreement.
You had your question.
And
John, are you finished, or did you want? Well, go ahead. Yeah, you go. You can go ahead. Is Lee still available? Your question was for Lee. Okay, you just had more.
no questions for Lee. I have some more information I would like to share.
Okay, go ahead. You can go ahead and share that information at this time.
All right, so back to the development agreement. And so these are the 5 deal points that are in the development agreement. So what I proposed to the city was there's no cost, there's no, and I'm not saying, so there, we will be on agenda items, and so there will be some things that'll take a little bit of time, but I'm saying outside the normal course of what cities would do and the normal day-to-day, there's no cost to the city. The goal of the development agreement is for us to pay for the creation of the TERS and for us to pay for, I believe there's one meeting, once a year on the TERS, there has to be an annual update. And the TERS moving forward, it's just that simple. Is that correct? And so there's one meeting that's required once a year, and there'll be somebody that comes and gives an update, and that's the extent of it. And so that's what that $2,500 a year is for, is just for that one update. And but you know, the agreement was designed for no risk to the city on PID bond payments. You don't have any financial risk, and you don't have any cost. And so, and this is what we've agreed to do in the developer's agreement. We've agreed to provide $500,000 for city park improvements financing. And so that's something that came from the city side. That wasn't something that we came up with and we said, hey, this is what we want. The city said, hey, it would be nice in these agreements if you would contribute to help us go ahead and get the park improved. And so, and if you go out there and do something, it was included in the TERS. If you go out there and increase the taxable property tax base, then you will, over a long period of time, get that money back. But if you don't do anything, your money is at risk and you won't get the money back. And so we'd be writing a check for $500,000. In the agreement, it says that we'll build a marina with some restaurants overlooking the lake. And in the agreement, it says that we'll start that within 6 months of finishing that road. It allows access, and we'll be finished within 18 months. It says we'll put walking trails in along the waterfront, and it says we'll purchase a small tract of city property in the corner of our development, and we'll go to a map here in just a second. But the city had that appraised, and they came up with a price of $400,000, but that was the amount of the appraisal. And so, in the development agreement, we'd be writing a check for $400,000 for the land. We would be putting in walking trails. We'd be putting in a marina, and we'd be writing another check for $500,000 to underwrite city park improvements. And the city's responsibility would just be to approve the use of PID bonds, which Jim Sabonis clearly stated is no financial risk to the city, and the cost of that, there's no cost to the city. And so those are the deal points. And so what I'm proposing to the city is, if you don't have, what do you have to gain by not approving it? And that's really a question. And so if there's no financial risk to the city for PID bonds and no cost, you're not out anything there. And and public streets and utilities will be built with that money, and our property would be the collateral for that, so you don't have anything to lose there. And then we're writing a check for $400,000, which was y'all's appraisal, and we're putting in trails and we're putting in amenities. We're writing another check for $500,000. You know, to me, that's all a benefit to the city. And your advisor is the one that said there's no risk to the city and no cost. And so the last 15 months of this agreement has been worked on to come up with a solution, and what the solution for improving Mount Pleasant, putting in housing, putting in amenities, doing all these things, we have the funding in place. And so I'm still trying to figure out what is the risk to the city. And I would suggest that there's more risk to not approving it. And so the risk to not approving it is you don't get the money for the city tract that, you know, quite honestly, the city didn't even know they owned until we told them, hey, we need this to build a road on. And so, and the amenities you don't get. And like I say, your financial advisor has said that, you know, there's no cost and no risk. And so the question, and I'm asking, the question is, what do you have to gain by not approving it?
John, I'll just have to say one thing there. I appreciate all those comments there. One thing that I think I heard that our attorney, Lee Ream, said was how damaging and how forceful and how important and how demanding that these federal tax liens can be on any and all properties that you could be involved in if your name's on it. Did I misunderstand her?
You did not. And my response to that was that certainly I understand if y'all want to forego passing this agreement tonight and clarify that. I understand that. And we could clarify that this would be excluded from any of that and it would not be an issue. But again, you know, you're not giving anything. You know, all you're doing is allowing us to use PID bonds. We're not asking you for any money. We're not asking the city for any money, any financial risk, and we're offering to give a lot of things to build Mount Pleasant. You know, I think it's been lost that we're 10 million plus already our investment in property here in Mount Pleasant. And so we're very heavily invested in this project, but we're not asking the city to invest anything.
John, this is not personal against you or Mr. Beatty or any of the partners, but when this kind of information comes out, and it is apparently, I mean, you haven't denied it, that this is what it is as far as these tax liens of 1.1 million as of today. That has to put in question in any business person or any just citizen. And again, it's not personal, but it has to question your abilities, your business abilities when this is happening, John.
So I feel like we're on the merry-go-round. And I'm saying the same thing. I'm saying I understand if you want to clarify that part of it. But I'm not. And I'm not the enemy. That's what I said at the beginning. You're not the enemy and I'm not the enemy. And so we're working together to build a better Mount Pleasant. And my question about that is if we get clarification on that, but the city's not being asked to do anything, if we were able to clarify that this project was unaffected by that, and we're not asking for anything, the only thing you can do is win. And so that's what I'm suggesting is if we're giving the city money and we're building things for the city and we're giving more money to the city and at no financial risk to the city, and if this is approved, can you go to that next slide? So this little section of road right here is what is needed to complete this road that goes through the development. So if the development, so our agreement with Christus is that we will build this road to allow for traffic flow through the development within 12 months. So Christus has this land right here under contract right now, and our agreement with them is if they move forward, we'll build this road here. So the hurdle right now is if the development agreement doesn't get approved, we can't build that road because we don't own this little piece of road right here where this would be. And so the downside to that is I actually have a meeting with them tomorrow to discuss where we're at. And so we did a traffic impact analysis, and it showed that the most effective way to flow traffic through this development for efficient traffic flow in Mount Pleasant was for this road to be installed here and there to be a light here. And what that allows for is it allows for all the traffic in the development to come out at a light, and this intersection down here on the service road wouldn't be the main intersection. And so with this in here, this allows for traffic flow, which goes all the way through and brings traffic out efficiently. Without the purchase of that property, Christus moving forward is in jeopardy, and because we can't fulfill our terms of the contract if we can't build that road. And so that'll be the discussion. And so the question was, what do you have to gain, and what do you have to lose if you don't approve it? You know, that's a risk to the city, is you possibly might not get additional health care because we can't build the road. You want to go to the next slide? All right, so some clarification on PID bonds. And so a while ago, it was mentioned that this is an additional cost. And I'd like to clarify that. And so just standard development process is a developer buys a piece of land, and then they put in improvements, and they divide the cost of what they've spent over the total number of lots, and then they add a little bit of profit to it, and then they sell it, and that's what the cost of the lot is. And whoever lives in that development has to absorb the cost of the roads and the utilities that are built in there. There's no other way for it to work. And so what these two boxes are right here, this is an example, or just a picture of the cost of improvements here. And so over here, the cost is the same. And so what I'd like to explain is, without PID bonds, the cost of development, it all comes through developer capital. And so what ends up happening is the lot cost is figured, and the purchaser pays a higher price up front. And the reason why is because all that money is recouped at the time of the sale. Whereas if you got PID bonds, here's the advantage to approving PID bonds. Is so the cost of improvement stays the same, but if you get half the money on PID bonds and half the money from developer capital, what happens whenever that lot is sold, the buyer pays a lot less money for the lot up front. And basically the lot is being financed through two separate sources. And so the cost of those improvements, part of those are being paid through a PID assessment, and part of those are being paid through upfront. What the developer paid up front, he'll recover that up front. And so what happens is, if they pay less up front for the lot, that means whenever they go to the bank, they have to finance less money, because another part of it is already financed. And so if you go to the bank and you're financing less money, it's not lowering their payment, but it's making it easier for them to purchase that house because the financing for that house is easier to get. So more people can get finance on those houses, which allows the houses to sell faster, which allows for a more efficient development. And so houses are bought and sold quicker because of the PID bond being in place. And so from the developer's perspective, it makes it easier because he has to come up with less money up front. And I mean, it's true of any business, anything you're doing. If you're restoring a car, if it costs half as much to do it, it gets done quicker. And so if it requires less capital, things happen faster. And so that's why we're asking for the PID bonds. The other thing it does is it allows additional equity in the deal. So whenever we're setting up our capital stack, if we want to do something else nice in the development, you know, there's more equity in there, so it's easier to finance those improvements. And so, but the misconception is if you have a PID assessment, you're paying more, but you're not paying more because the cost of that road is the same. You know, if it costs, let's make up a number and say $10 million to build roads, it's the same cost, whether it's financed through a PID bond or developer capital or however, it's the same cost. So if you're in a PID district, you don't pay more. You're just financing at two different places. But it makes it easier for everybody because it's less capital up front. And so that's the advantage to a PID. And so everybody understands. It's not additional, it's just part of it, finance in a different spot. All right, this is just, I mean, this just goes back to, it's not costing the city anything, there's no risk, they're getting all these amenities. Plus they're also getting, project construction cost out there is gonna be about $250 million total. And that's over the life of the development. And you know, one of the questions that I get, you know, on a regular basis, I would say is, what if it takes longer to develop? And I think that's a good question. But the response to that is that money is continually being spent. It's still money that's going in the economy. If it happens today, if it happens tomorrow, it's all money that's coming. And it will be built out. And during that time, there's no risk to the city and there's no cost to the city, but there is added income to the city because from day one, the property tax base continues to increase. And so when we build the first phase of apartments and then whenever we have to put whenever we put the first street in, we'll have to plat, which what's out there now is 2 abandoned houses and a couple pastures, and most of the property there's in ag. And so the city gets very little property tax income. And it doesn't look good from the interstate. And so they're getting nothing now. And so with nothing now and no cost and no risk, why wouldn't it make sense to allow somebody to come in and develop? And so, but when the project's built out, it's 5.3 million maybe is what that added up to. Something like that in that neighborhood of property tax income for the city and related entities through annual property taxes. The estimated sales tax, just the city and the county's part, which I think the city gets 0.5%, and the county gets 0.5%, and the city gets 1.5%. Which so out of that estimated 900-something thousand, the county would get 1/4 of that, and the city would get 3/4 of that. And so more additional income, and it allows for job creation. Everybody here will tell you that without housing, we can't build. We can't add employees, and so we can't build industry in Mount Pleasant without added housing. And then if Christus comes, you get a facelift on I-30. You know, people, you get a welcome mat out there. They'll have a nice hospital campus, and compared to what you got now, you know, it'll look nice. And Christus will basically be taking about half of our frontage on I-30. And so that tells you what it'll look like. And then you're going to have new housing. And so you'll have apartments, townhomes, and single-family houses. And so what is the next? All right, so what is the risk to the city if this doesn't end up getting approved? And so we're not obligated to provide any amenities. The city won't get the 2 checks. Christus may not be coming, and the main roadway will not be completed as designed because we don't have that corner piece of property. And so what's the next one? And so if the development is approved, we'll be contractually obligated to provide walking trails. We'll be contractually obligated to build a marina. City will receive the 2 checks. Christus will move forward, and we're talking to some restaurants right now that are saying if Christus comes, they're most likely going to move forward. And so I think that may be the, and then, you know, that just goes back to we have the same goals. And so my suggestion with all that in mind is y'all have raised some concerns. Let's address those. And so let's address the concerns, but at the same time, you know, if you know, obviously the tax lien, let's address that. Let's go through that and see how it affects this. And number 2, let's address if 2,500 isn't enough and it needs to be an incremental increase for that one update each year. Let's address that. But you know, if we're presenting an agreement with no cost and no risk, what is that? I still don't. If somebody could, I understand that there's some things that need to be addressed. Y'all made that clear. We don't have any. We understand that, but at the same time, how do we build Mount Pleasant if we're offering an agreement with no cost and no risk to the city? What benefit is it to the city not to approve that, to get tens and, you know, in the end, hundreds of millions of dollars in increased tax base? Get a nice residential community with a nice backdrop on the lake. Tell me, how would it be in the city's best interest? And I'm asking because I don't know, because I'm wanting to learn here. And so let's figure out how we can make it work. I mean, everybody knows we need housing. There's $1 billion in commercial leakage in retail. And so, you know, everybody goes to Longview to shop. People go to Longview to eat. You know, it's constantly money leaving our community to be spent in our community, which not only is an inconvenience because we don't have those things, but at the same time, it's tax dollars that we're losing that would benefit the city budget. And so you tell me, how can we make it work? Once we address the issues, you know, we've got that, but moving past that, what else can we do? Is there something else in the agreement that we need to address? Or you know, I think everybody likes the idea of the development, but what do we need to address to get to the finish line? I'm asking you because, like I say, y'all can poke holes in everything I do. I don't doubt that, you know. But
and we have to do. We're not representing ourselves individually. We're representing 16,000 people. It's not poking holes. We have the obligation to our citizens to look at every part before we make a decision.
So I understand that. So the question I have for you is, what in the agreement can we change to make it better for the city?
I think one of the things that Ms. Lee pointed out was the language in the contract, in the development agreement, the shalls and the mays. That's one thing I know that probably need to be addressed first. And then along with, you know, the clarifying this tax lien is another, you know. Those are a couple of things that I'm pretty sure the council is got weight on them right now. But, I believe Ms. Spruill had something to speak on also, or is it something that you were addressing? Come on up, come on up.
I've been sitting back here listening to this for a good while. How did we get to this point? I understood that we went through 15 Mike Price, 507 is A. I've been here all my life. I've probably done as much banking stuff as anybody has in this room, and I've had a hard time paying for some of it. It sounds to me like we've been doing this for 15 months with your people, with the city's people. How did we get here tonight and not know what's in this development agreement? Your people, is it correct? You've been meeting once a week for 15 months. How did we get to this point? And going through all this tonight, it doesn't make sense. The attorney said that the tax deal didn't matter. Then y'all's attorney said it did. I'm gonna tell you who it matters to. It matters to the person that's loaning him the money. It doesn't matter to y'all. If he has a tax lien, those financial institutions are not gonna loan him any money. So you don't have to worry about it. Is that right? When I go to the bank and borrow money, if I got a tax lien, I'm not getting a loan. So leave it up to the attorneys, leave it up to the banking people. All you're doing is voting on a development agreement that you put together. Every one of y'all had to put it together because the city and this man met every week for 15 months. How'd we get here? Thank y'all.
Thank you, sir.
Rocky Christenberry, Franklin County resident, but more importantly, I am Executive Vice President of Prefert Manufacturing. Been with the company about 23 years. My job at Prefert, quite simply, is to think about the now and beyond. What's coming next? What's our future look like? What buildings next? What machine are we purchasing next? Where is it going to go? We got 150 positions open right now on property we just developed. Brand new greenfield, beautiful piece of property. We got plans of 40 acres of buildings there. I've got very small hopes right now of staffing that. Very small. And so when you think about other companies wanting to come to Mount Pleasant, Texas, you know what I do when I go look at another town? What's the staffing look like? What does the demographic look like? Do they have housing? Will people come here? And any business that wants to look at this town and why that park is empty out there knows this. They have to have a place to come to. We bring people in here constantly. We fly them in. We talk them into coming and visit us. And what I hear a lot is, well, what have you got that we haven't got where we're at? I can stay in Dallas and I can go eat wherever I want to eat. I don't have to drive anywhere. My wife can go shopping. Not a big deal. Is the cost of living cheaper here? Well, we can't say that anymore. You know, housing has gone up because there's not enough of it. There's not enough places for the people to go and be able to plug into a job very quickly. We've got a gentleman right now that moved here from Marshall's, been here a year and a half. We're talking top level executive. Finding the right place has been quite a challenge for him. We've had several executives come here and walk away because they just couldn't make it all work here with what we had. So the fact is, Prefert is already making moves outside of this town, outside of East Texas. We're already looking at other properties, not because we want to, we don't really have a choice. So when we talk about risk, when I heard the word risk, the city's at risk. You know what your risk is? Not getting tax dollars from the businesses that are growing. You see, and I'm not speaking for the other companies, but I'm going to name some. Diamond C, Big Tex, Best Fender. We're all just robbing the same people back and forth. Yes, their wages are going up. Good for them. That's great. But our hands are tied. Our feet are tied. We're at the point, we've been talking about this for a while. We've been saying we got to get housing, and we brought a guy, the EDC brought a guy in here to do a study. And what do they need? Well, they need more places to eat. They need things they can do in the evening. They need to be able to really have an atmosphere and things to do outside of work. We've got to create that. It's important that we create that. If we don't create, the risk is we're not going to have, I've heard everybody talk about how our taxes have gone up. Taxes just keep going up, if Lumina shut down. Well, your tax base comes from industry and growth. Each individual in here, they're carrying the burden of the lack of that. We need more of it. But how are we going to get more if we just keep saying no or kicking the can down the road? And when do you get an opportunity for someone to come in and say, I'll spend this kind of money? And we didn't have to co-sign a loan. And last I heard, if the housing costs too much and nobody moves in it, it's his loan that's at default. It's not mine. Wow, what an opportunity. So I'm a little bit passionate about this because I've been living this. We've been fighting to get a new rail spur for 10 years, and we've been finally getting here. You know what? I'm getting to see things we've dreamed together, Bill. I've been getting to see things happen. It's pretty exciting. We've gone far beyond what we should have. I don't even know how it happened, but God's been good. And we've managed to get where we're at, and now we're running into a wall that we don't have an answer to. Bill's been talking about trying to figure out how to build homes, and gosh, the expense of doing that out and on the top of building business and the time it takes. We need help. We need help. Somebody came along and says, I'm willing to help. I just need a road. That's all I need. Really? Do you want more business? Do you want more growth? Saying no to this, you're saying no to that. And that's kind of where I'm at now.
All right, thank you.
I can't add much to what Rocky said, but of course, everything he said is correct. I can't advise you on the legalities, contracts. All I can do is reiterate what everybody here knows. We need labor. We are attempting to bring labor to Mount Pleasant. And there's not enough housing in Mount Pleasant. We can't attract labor to Mount Pleasant. Hey, I heard a man say that Christmas won't come if we can't build. He didn't say how many feet, but it was a short distance. And the city owns the land. I'm sorry, I'm not upset. The city owns the land. Why should he build the road? Get out there, y'all, and build the road. You own the land. It only makes sense. I'm sorry. But I'm not the kind that sits around and lets little things stop big things. And what Mike Price said here tonight, we have spent, it's after 9 o'clock tonight, and every question here should have been answered
behind closed doors long before tonight. What this community doesn't know about prefab manufacturing, we'll fill books. He mentioned we own a huge field. We bought the old City Mount Pleasant Airport. But for years, I've been buying the land all the way around it. Railroad goes right through the middle of our property. We have 50 acres on one side and 250 on the other. Inside the new loop. That's not counting the ranch. When he said we have a complex of buildings, not land, not acres of land, acres of buildings drawn that are at risk if we can't get labor. We have an older piece of property he didn't even mention that's partially, well, both of them are partially started. 30 acres. That's 70 acres of roof. And yet, I have run into this my entire life. I'm 75 years old now. Just graduated college the other day in 1970. But people that told me for my whole life, you can't do that. Oh, that'll never happen. I pointed out to Bowie Cass that I needed to move some telephone poles. This was 30 years ago. Because we were going to build that building all the way to the railroad track. Well, we were standing out there on acres and acres of land, and they could have laughed at me. It wasn't no time, and we had built buildings all the way to the railroad track, from the highway to the railroad. And then we bought more land there. That's 50 acres in our complex that you're looking at. You have no clue. I wish every one of you would come and let us give you a tour. You have no clue what we're up to. Our primary, what we're known for is manufacturing ranch equipment. We can manufacture a lot more than ranch equipment. But ranch equipment itself, 2 years ago, we set out on a plan to double the production of ranch equipment, and we're a year from it. You underestimate Mount Pleasant. The people of Mount Pleasant highly underestimate Mount Pleasant. We are a manufacturing base. It's not. When we moved here in 1962, a lot of y'all weren't born yet. Everyone depended on the refinery, had 300 employees. They were dependent on Lone Star Steel, let's say 6,000 employees, but 30 miles away. And Pilgrims, homegrown, local people, built a nationally known industry in Mount Pleasant, Pittsburgh, Texas. 6,000 people in the two counties, according to what I've heard. I can't give you a fact. Everything but Pilgrims is gone. Texas Utility has come and gone. Huge. But that was a pure gift. That wasn't homegrown. My dad came here in 1962, and it was the industries I named. And farming. We all know farming is not it's a wonderful lifestyle. Our living is made in farming. We're agricultural. I'm not downplaying farming. What I'm telling you is it's not an economic benefit to Mount Pleasant, Texas. It's not an industry. It's not a profitable industry, let me put it that way. Just so happens, God put my father here. And he started building head gates because he had some manufacturing knowledge. Not education, just some knowledge. Jigs, presses, things that were unknown in Mount Pleasant, Texas. We started hiring employees. One of our employees was John McCallum. A lot of y'all probably don't know John's name. John McCallum was the first man to start building trailers in Mount Pleasant, Texas. John McCallum started the trailer industry in Northeast Texas. He told my dad, he says, he saw what Dad was doing. He said, Marvin, I'm going to go home and start building trailers. He did. His employees would go home to their daddy's two-car garage and start building trailers. And some of those companies today are bigger than pre-manufacturing in Mount Pleasant, Texas. We have a manufacturing base. We are based on manufacturing in Mount Pleasant, Texas, and City Council don't want to recognize it. EDC don't want to recognize it. Industrial Foundation don't want to recognize it. Chamber of Commerce has no idea. We don't get help. Industrial Foundation, if somebody will promise, not guarantee, somebody will promise 100 employees, Industrial Foundation will give them the land and the building. I don't know that that's a fact, but you get the idea. You know what? We had 100. We try. We can't because they're not available. Rocky said we need 150 people. We've needed over 150 people for the last 3 to 4 years, and have not accomplished that addition. We're around 1,000 people. We'll add 100 people every year. And what will the city of Mount Pleasant do for us? If we want to build a building, we get a bill for, what's it called, Rocky? It's a fee. Well, the EDC, I pointed this out, cost us $5,000 to pay a fee to Mount Pleasant, Texas to build a building. And the IDC stepped up and said, okay, we'll pay that. EDC, I'm sorry. So the community is paying that. It wasn't the $5,000 I was speaking about. It's the idea that local boys don't get support from the community. And here I sit here, and we got an opportunity to get some housing and all kinds of arguments against it. And some of them weren't even mentioned tonight because they started out large and became apparently false. And the city of Mount Pleasant should be doing what John Anderson's doing. But you don't get no risk. You don't spend nothing. You don't help. It might cost something. It might cost the city something. Why, I think I heard him say $500,000 given just to help parks. That don't make no sense. Why should he help the city build parks when he's helping the city get... I don't know John Anderson. I'm not speaking for his character or his tax problems or anything like that. John Anderson and I met less than 2 weeks ago. I don't know him. But here's somebody lives in Mount Pleasant, trying to invest in Mount Pleasant. And we got a city trying to bring a hospital into Mount Pleasant, which I'm not fully in favor of. I think we have a wonderful hospital in Mount Pleasant, by the way. We have wonderful doctors. And our hospital does a fantastic job. It got a bad reputation up until about 5 to 10 years ago that it deserved, but it's doing great now. I'm in favor of supporting our local hospital. I'm not against Christus. It's a great outfit. And if you can see how that can help us and not hinder our local hospital, I'm in favor of it. But here's a man trying, and we're saying he's got, that road that the city already owns the land on, out in the pasture, lakefront property, in the city of Mount Pleasant. How ridiculous. Preferred Manufacturing is involved more than seriously. It's virtually a done deal. We're involved in a $150 million expansion, but not in Mount Pleasant, Texas. We're doubling ranch equipment in Mount Pleasant, Texas. We're growing what y'all don't even know. We sell more dollars in steel. We're a larger steel merchant than manufacturing. We sell cut-to-size steel for other manufacturers in the area within 200 miles. And that is growing. That is, in less than 10 years, that has become twice the dollars in sales of ranch equipment. Mount Pleasant doesn't know that, don't care. That's where the 40 acres of buildings are going. I say we don't have rail service. We preferred, at our expense, we're not asking the city for help. Never even thought about it. Probably should have. Maybe could have. I don't know. Don't need it. We're building spurs to accommodate 30 more railroad cars a day. That's per day. Railroad cars of steel coming into Mount Pleasant, Texas. You don't know about that. Don't even care. We don't even care to let you know about it. We're not asking for help. We're already handle 10 cars a day. We're adding 30 cars a day on the old airport. Oh, could I go into the old airport? The story of Prefer gaining the old airport, which I had already bought land around, and our ranch surrounded. I don't have time and shouldn't get into that right now. But we had agreements with the city of Mount Pleasant that they changed after the fact. Only God gave us the airport where we're building another 70 acres of buildings and railroad spurs for 30 cars a day. Y'all don't care, you don't know about it. Henry, I helped raise him. He started working for, I guess he was 16 years old, working on the farm. But he hadn't been back. They don't know what we're doing. We can't get enough help is the problem. We're doubling and tripling in Mount Pleasant, Texas in the next few years, and we're moving out of Mount Pleasant in the next few years because of lack of labor. Thank you. Solve the lack of labor problem. Housing's just a part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Y'all want me back up here?
I was waiting on Councilwoman Sproul. If you had any more questions or anything for Mr. Anderson?
I think Nathan wants to say something.
Team members, City Council, City Manager, Nathan Tafoya, Executive Director for Mount Pleasant Economic Development Corporation. I won't take long. I know we've been here a long night. But we wrote a letter in support of the Anderson project last week, and I'll read a quick version of that just into the record. But just wanted to reiterate a lot of the things I'm really glad a private sector person was able to be here and convey with the passion that I'm also trying to convey on behalf of a lot of the, whether it's Pilgrims, Prefer, Diamond Sea, we're your agent to go touch and talk to these companies and find out what is frustrating them, what is driving some of their inability to grow, and it with the same passion that you saw Mr. Prefer and Mr. Rocky speaking with is the same fervor that we experience, and I'm conveying that to you as your partners and as part of your team to make sure you just have that in your back pocket and understand as you make decisions. And we know it's tough, and as you do your due diligence. So I'll read the record very quickly. So on behalf of local industry, employers, and our community's extensive manufacturing tax base, Mount Pleasant Economic Development Corporation wishes to express strong support for the Anderson Town Center mixed-use development. MPDC respectfully urges the city's elected officials to find a way to approve the upcoming developer agreement and to signal Mount Pleasant's continued business-friendly environment and its ability to problem solve. The issue does not have to be binary. MPEDC believes the Anderson project will catalyze growth and meet critical community needs, including a master planned development on the I-30 corridor, curbing potential urban sprawl. 2, housing, retail, and service amenities. 4, redevelopment and adaptive reuse of a little-known city park and lake. 5, expanded infrastructure improvements. And 6, attractive investment levels at more than $250 million. Through the year, we touch manufacturing companies during interviews and various interaction opportunities. All of them say this: workforce housing is desperately needed for both new business and existing business expansions. I'd venture to say Mount Pleasant is behind the curve when it comes to this, and we noticed that right around the 2020 COVID mark. And we've been saying that at our State of the Economy address. But we believe the expedited timelines and milestones built into this project will have trickle-down benefits and reverberating positive impacts in this community. Lastly, the nature and geographic location of this project will allow Mount Pleasant to maintain controlled and shepherded development, enabling quality growth, all while allowing the community to maintain that small town feel. That small town feel that was so critical to the citizens in the 2050 comp plan, which I was privileged to participate in with many of you, and which I've personally grown to love as a transplant to Mount Pleasant. Mount Pleasant understands the City Council has much to consider in matters related to the city. Thank you for your service to our community and for your consideration in this historic and pivotal juncture. Your decision is sure to have deep, long-lasting impact on our community's economic outlook. And I know from past experience that we can find a way forward with some of the things that we've done in the past. I know there's due diligence and there can be a way to move forward. Councilman Dell was instrumental, and he has the mind too, as the most tenured counselor, lead some of the group to understand and knock off some of those checkpoints and those check marks that needed to be taken off that might in any way hinder the project. But I know this council can find a way forward, and we implore you to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nate.
Excuse me, I got another thought, unrelated. Well, it's not unrelated, it is related, but different. He should have just right then spoke about our opportunity to build a real helpful industrial district for East Texas. I mentioned earlier that we don't have rail service. Well, everybody can see Union Pacific Main Line going through Mount Pleasant, Texas. Preferred manufacturing is built on both sides of it. We got a 10 car spur on one side, building a 30 car spur on the other side. And I still say we don't have rail service in Mount Pleasant, Texas? Yes. Union Pacific is a main line. I didn't know this 5 years ago. I thought we had rail service. There's 5 main lines in the United States. Main lines do not want to serve local industry. They see their biggest opportunity going from Detroit to Houston, New York to Los Angeles. They want large trains, fully loaded, moving fast, and not stopping. Preferred manufacturing isn't even a blip on their radar. We are tiny. We are small. They do not want us. There are some kinds of regulations, I guess, somewhere that they have to serve us, or they wouldn't. Mount Pleasant doesn't have rail service. You might as well acknowledge that. Caterpillar Tractor Company would laugh at Mount Pleasant, Texas. Not because we're small, not even because we lack labor. They can attract labor. They don't have rail service. What I didn't know 5 years ago, and what Mount Pleasant doesn't know, is there are such services as short line service. We purchased a steel processing company in Fort Worth. It used to be called Amsco Steel, which was a very big service center for Texas. We purchased that, I don't know, 3-4 years ago. And we're on the Fort Worth Western short line rail service. They go to the major rail yards with their rail. They provide a service to the majors and to the local industry that Mount Pleasant doesn't have. They go to the big yards. They carry those rail cars into the industries buildings all over Fort Worth, Dallas, South and Southwest, and around. Any sizable industry will not move to where there is not a short line service. we don't have short line service, but we have short line rail. Mount Pleasant could be the largest industrial center attracting jobs in East Texas. Texas Utilities moved out, but they left us a rail yard that is connected to 3 majors. Four miles from Mount Pleasant, Texas, in Titus County. We, as a community, Nathan is the expert on this. Nathan is hard on this. I think y'all are aware of it personally, but the community is not. Maybe I'm speaking too early, but I don't think so. Nathan, am I speaking too early? A little bit? All right. Okay, so I'll shut up a lot about that. All right. It's in the works. It needs support by anybody that loves East Texas and Mount Pleasant. However, Mount Pleasant actually has the rail for shoreline service right into Mount Pleasant, Texas. Can't do it because railroads are not government owned, or they're privately owned. And Union Pacific owns the rail that would be our short line service from Franklin County to Mount Pleasant. And they will not relinquish it. And that takes politics to get that done. All right, good. We need help. All right. But politics, people power, will get short line to Mount Pleasant, Texas, and with help from the city, Mount Preferred Manufacturing can build less than a mile and attach to it. It's only $1 million a mile. That's fairly cheap. So, but guys, we have the potential for industry right here. We need very little help. We need very little help. Why would I want to attract other industry to Mount Pleasant? Because industry attracts labor. Texas Utilities didn't really hurt Preferred Manufacturing, even though they paid double the wages. They attracted labor. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, do we have anything else? Mrs. Squirrel, did you have anything?
There has been a lot of information exchanged here tonight, most of it very beneficial. We have been a long time involved in this process, and it is a complicated process requiring a lot of time. In defense of the council, we did receive our printed copy Thursday. It's hard to read it on your phone, so you can make notes and ask questions. We only received the final draft on Thursday or at least that's when I received mine, to be able to look it over and then to ask and get clarity on any of the details that's in it. I know this is not what we're here for, but the Christus has mentioned a couple times. I have learned on the council that on city-owned property like on that, if you just need a little piece for a road, there's no need not to be able to work that out. I mean, that's easy to fix with or without this agreement. I don't know if you're aware of that, but I haven't heard that request, but my understanding is we can fix that. If you just need that little piece of that property for the road, the actual street, to make that Christus happen, obviously, we need to address that, in my opinion, with you, even if this is not passing. We need to do it quickly so that you can proceed with your Christus opportunity. But in light of what we're here tonight for, specifically, my understanding is to discuss the actual development agreement, the details of the agreement itself, and the way it would involve the city from the time it's passed until the last, I guess, the 30 years, maybe. I'm not sure about the duration, but I know it can be a long, long time. This is a long-term agreement. It will probably be enforced and being executed. I know it'll be way before, none of this will be involved. That's the thing about cities. They do turn over. They turn over management very frequently and city council representatives. So there is a lot of change. That also complicates the long-term involvement for the city. That's just a fact. I mean, it's not saying it's insurmountable. It's not saying it's not worth it. But that is a long-term concern, to pass these agreements to the next administration and to the next people to oversee. I think John's done a tremendous job trying to put something together out there, and we've all wanted to see growth on that corridor. And as a real estate agent since 1986 right here active, we do have a need for housing. I will say this as an aside, there are some guys here right now that are building houses and have some stuff in the works. Not to say this wouldn't be a great asset, but there are, just if people are wondering, there are some things going on and there's some developments in place. Okay, so I think you probably would understand that, but there's quite a bit of growth and, house building, that's been already platted and planned. Utilities are in place and are underway now. And I think out in the CAPS area, it's already set up. Even, I think we already have the utilities out there, for an example, and I think there's going to be up to 1,400 more homes added out there. So just to make us like we're just absolutely stopping house development, that's not altogether true. We're here to discuss this agreement and its effect on the city, the obligation on the city, the cost. I do want to point out 2 or 3 things this was a very quick final exam for me to be able to try to take. It's a long document. Some of it's just fillers like the appraisals and stuff, but the actual nuts and bolts of the agreement, I found it to be 40-ish pages that are the meat and potatoes of this development agreement. And I mean this with all respect. I am still a little concerned that our developers, there's 2 of them, there's partners, are financially capable of meeting the development obligations. The development requires $35 to $40 million to construct the infrastructure. With last year's delay in paying the taxes by one of the partners and the current federal lien, which have been well discussed, I have concerns about the developer's ability to meet its obligations. That may be answered, but right now I still have a problem with that. To compound that problem, there's some provisions in the agreement that do not require, the way I understand it, that the developer only being reimbursed after the infrastructure is built. I need to be clear on that. I'm not clear, but it sounds to me that gave me some pause, that do not require that the developer only be reimbursed after the infrastructure is built. It seems possible that the city could be helping with funding the infrastructure, according to the development, the way I understood it over a very short weekend of time. I'm telling you, no, let me finish and you can please. But as of the way I understood it right now, I'm not clear on that. And we're being asked to vote on things, and I need to be clear on what I'm voting on. Because once we vote, these are very hard, if not impossible, to revoke. Now, they're very binding, and they're very long-lasting. That is a fact. So that it is important from my seat that I do my very best to understand what I'm voting on to the best of my ability. So this seems more risky than being on just a reimbursement basis only. And I think that's somewhere else addressed in paragraph 6. I'm still a little concerned that the cost to build, purchase, or rent the units as planned is not clearly feasible given the market of Mount Pleasant. I understand we need some more housing. I know that what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Let's use, more jobs and more housing, more jobs, and it's going to continue to be a cycle that way. I get that. But, we have to make sure what the wages will be with those jobs that come and what the housing, who can afford the houses and what it takes to qualify. So those are just some concerns that I have, qualification of the buyer based on these potential jobs. And all that comes into play as to what expense that the house being offered, what it costs. You have to qualify and be able to afford the payments and anything associated with it. I'm not comfortable with the inclusion of the TERS and it not being clear on whether the county's going to be involved or not. I think we should have had some kind of a meeting with them and had a meeting of the minds on that for both entities. I'm not comfortable, I guess be a word, with that until we know more about the county's position on that issue. And back to this, while there's a lot of discussion about there being no risk to the city, and I get it, the bond is covered by the property, okay? The bond itself will be, the taxpayer will not have to pay the bond back. We had to get a bond to expand the sewer plant, the taxpayer and their water bill will have to help pay that. But this bond will be covered by the project. So that part of it is there is no risk to the taxpayer. First, there seems to be limits on that payment deal and that's already been mentioned, the $2,500. That seems to be a very minimal figure. I still don't, I think we need some more information and more exact of how that's going to be administered, how those PID taxes will be assessed and collected, and the estimated cost of doing that. Exactly what process are we going to use? I know I believe there's more than one way to have that done. That would have been nice to have been more detailed. It's just hard to quantify those expenses. We have a really hard time when we're budgeting to estimate sometimes the cost of of executing certain things on behalf of the city. And in fact, if it doesn't succeed, it may or may not. Not everything. There's no guaranteed success for any developments. There's no guaranteed success. And if it does not succeed, it could be left with somewhat of a distraction or an eyesore. It could be. I mean, you get something started and it's not completed, and there's no vertical stuff, and it's half done. It's not that's not my biggest concern, but it is a real possibility. There is a chance that it will not succeed, and then depending on the quality of the work on the roads and stuff, that has to do with once those roads are dedicated to the streets or dedicated to the city. There's a lot of expense in maintaining streets and stuff, and we need to be very involved in the construction of those streets and the things involved with those, that make sure that that we're getting quality stuff that's reasonable for future maintenance. So thank you for your time for listening to me.
Mayor, I have one thing I'd like to say with the revelations that we've had today. I think we need to have Lee come through, clean up some of the language in here. I think we need to hear from Jeff Gobles. He's our counsel on our bonds. I think we need to hear from him on how the lien affects the property, if the lien affects the property. I would make a motion right now to table this until a further day, until we can move forward and figure out what we're dealing with here. I think we need to clean this up. I think all of us want growth with as little problems as possible, and I think we need to clean up these issues. I think we've been doing it for 15 months straight. We've had Robert LaCroix, Jeff Gobles, we've had Jim Sabonis, we've had David, we've had our internal team working on this. These are not people that do these things lightly, and I just feel like that if this lien was going to be an issue, that would have been brought up a long time ago. So I think it can be cleared up by these same people. So I would make a motion right now to table this until we can get these issues cleaned up and get the language cleaned up.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Adams. Before I act on that, I just wanted to see if anyone else had anything before you have. Love. All right, we don't have anyone else. Will, that is your motion to table this item to clear up any language or any other clarifications. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. I make a motion that we table this item to get it cleared up, to talk to our attorneys, and to find out how the lien affects the property, if the lien affects the property, and to clean up the language in the agreement. Namely, I would as well. I would like to clean up the issuance of the TERS. But one other thing, once we get past this, and if we can get to some discussion, I want to ask John one other question about the TERS. Does the TERS with the county affect, yes or no, the development?
Not at all. And so, two unrelated. The TERS for the city, the TERS is a mechanism that allows the city to sell the property to us as part of the TERS for $400,000. So the city only receives money for that property, and the other thing that was brought to us and asked of us was, hey, would you go ahead and fund $500,000 for park improvements, and then through the TERS we'll reimburse you over a very long period of time if you build and you increase the tax base there. And so outside of that, there's the city doesn't owe anything to us, and there's no incentive to us, but the TERS was primarily to convey that property, and then the city asked for that $500,000 funding in addition to the $400,000, and so it's irrelevant to the county participation.
So your TERS request of the county has no bearing on this agreement at all. That's not an issue for you going forward.
That's exactly right.
All right, thank you, Ms. James.
Councilwoman Spruill, just a quick, and we can talk about this later if you want to, but on what you were saying about the developer getting money up front or a reimbursement, and what that refers to is we don't get paid for anything that's not completed. That's how the PID rules are set up. But what that's referring to is there's two processes. There's one process where the bond is issued up front, and then as you move through the construction process, city engineers, our engineer, everybody would agree that this certain portion of the construction is complete, and they would release a part of the money to pay the contractors on that portion. But it's nothing that the city would pay anything for or do anything for. It's just if it's paid as you go along, but only once construction is completed, but during the process or when you complete all the construction. So that's what it's referring to.
All righty, thank you, Mr. Anderson. Okay, there's been a motion made to table this item by Councilman Adams. Do we have a second?
So I just want to say that I want to see this development be successful, because I want to see Mount Pleasant grow. Like many have said, and I'm here tonight to speak, that Mount Pleasant's at a standstill right now. We're losing people to this community, and our industries being, they're not being afforded the opportunity to grow their industry, their business, because again, the biggest you know, thing we have there is lack of housing. But, cause I wanna be able to see us grow this community so we can increase our business and labor force, grow this community, attract tourists to come to Mount Pleasant, spend their money, you know, call this a vacation spot, whatever it may be, but I wanna see Mount Pleasant grow. I haven't lived here all my life, but, one thing I've noticed since I've lived here, since 1996, Mount Pleasant has not grown. And I've always asked myself, why is Mount Pleasant not growing? And I don't wanna pass up this opportunity. So, with that said, I second that motion.
All right. All right, well, I'm gonna go ahead and, close the discussion part of it before we take a vote on it. We had a first by Councilman Adams, second by Councilman Chappelle. And Madam Secretary, record a vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Let me just say, before my vote, I'm very reluctant to table this tonight. I spoke very frankly and very upfront with everyone on my concerns on this. I have gave grateful thought on this. I've tried to make the best informed, educated decision that I can for the majority of the citizens, which is 16,000 people here in Mount Pleasant. I'm very reluctant to do that. I guess what I will say, and I spent hours on this, and I've been at this dance, a lot of you heard me say, I've been at this dance since the first song was sung. A lot of people came in when the last verse was being sung, didn't know who sang it, what instruments was played, or anything. I have had the privilege of serving up here on this council, and this is a very important matter. After careful consideration, out of courtesy to my fellow council members, I'm going to vote yes to table this at this time.
Aye. Aye.
I'm gonna place a vote tonight because I know John Anderson, and I know how long we've worked on this, and I know that we can clear this up because I want growth for Mount Pleasant. And John has a passion for this, and I believe that we can get this finished up and we can get this through. John, thank you for your push for Mount Pleasant, and thank everybody for coming and speaking. Thank you so much. I'm gonna vote in affirmative, yes.
All right, thank you, Mr. Adams. We have a vote, it's unanimous, this item will be tabled. We'll now go ahead and close this item on the agenda. We'll move on now to item 5, which is our city manager's report.
Mayor and City Council, I have no report tonight.
Well, that was the shortest and sweetest. Again, I wanna say, again, thank you to all of you that came tonight. We know this is a very, very important matter, and then myself included, I wanna see this place grow. I mean, I have to say personally on progression. I wanna see our city grow. I really do. And hopefully we can get this project through. We just wanna iron out all the kinks and let Mount Pleasant grow. Thank you for coming. We adjourn.